I'm Clyde Blackburn, attending from home, and I don't have visibility of who else is in the chamber, so perhaps Councillor Bressey, you could let us know that.
Sure. So in chambers, we've got Councillor Thiessen, Councillor Friesen, Councillor Minhas, Councillor Clayton, Councillor O'Toole, and myself.
And so Councillor Pilat is not there?
That's correct. Councillor Pilat is not here.
Okay, so members of committee include me, Councillor Clayton, and Mayor Given. First off, we have a delegation, Mr. Ryan Pomeroy, and Mr. Pomeroy, if you're there, then I would welcome you to turn on your camera and microphone and begin your presentation. We're hoping that you can keep it to about 5 minutes. We'll look forward to hearing from you. Go ahead.
Do you mind sharing the permission so that we can put up a presentation, please?
Shane, is that you to do that?
You should be able to now.
Can you see that okay?
Yes, we can. I'll just ask you to introduce yourselves and begin your presentation.
Okay, yeah, thank you and good morning. So we're here to present a proposal about the Regional High Performance Sports Center that Jordan and I have been working on. I'll start by introducing myself. My name's Ryan Pomeroy. I'm the CEO of Pomeroy Lodging. We're a local hospitality business. I've been based here in Grande Prairie since the mid-90s. I spent a good portion, the majority of my life now in Grande Prairie. Was a high performance athlete myself, playing volleyball at the Grande Prairie Regional College. Went on to play with our men's national team and played professionally overseas for many years before returning back to Grande Prairie. Let Jordan introduce himself.
Jordan Johnson. I'm a professional engineer, moved up to Grande Prairie in 2010, worked for 7 Generations Energy and started the field office up here and hired upwards of 120 people, which currently work out of the field office here for 7 Generations Energy. Recently retired about 3 months ago, started my MBA, and now working on some other cool projects where I can give back to the community, and I currently reside on 4 different boards and help distribute my time.
And in addition to Jordan and myself, Murray Taves has been helping us with the project, who isn't here today. Murray's the CEO of Bonnett's Energy Corp and also the president of our AJHL hockey club, the Storm. So bit about us there, the property's history. This property was built by my father in about 2008. It was built as really a world-class equine facility, and it is truly a world-class facility. You know, it was built in conjunction with many other properties, but I estimate my father spent about $6 or $7 million to build it when he built it. It's about 60,000 square feet of under roof space. So the main building is about 35 of that, and then there's 2 outbuildings, and it sits on a 75-acre parcel of land. So the building and sort of the timing with COVID, my father passed this summer, has really sort of brought the culmination of the opportunity for this project. You know, I'm really motivated to see this happen. In part, in a legacy to my father, to be candid. I want to see the facility live on and continue to be something truly world-class. And I think as, you know, I went through COVID with my family, as many other people have, the need and desire for recreation became, you know, really apparent. My kids play high-performance sport. I grew up doing that and believe it's such a valuable piece of, you know, our culture and our community. Really what we want to do here is create a high-performance sports center that brings all the best athletes, coaches, facilitators, you know, together under one roof to, you know, channel a culture of excellence within the region, and make Grande Prairie a place that we can retain and recruit our best and brightest talent, not only from within the city itself, but from in the surrounding areas, so we don't lose those talents to other cities.
So as Ryan was saying, like, the dream for this facility is to bring together the best coaches and athletes under one roof and deliver high quality programming to help each athlete achieve. We want to create a culture for athletes where they're excited to come, open to learn, feel safe to fail, and celebrate success together. They will learn that being a good person is more important than being a great athlete, and that building character and confidence will take them far in life. We believe that the right combination of education, coaching, instruction, training, nutrition, and motivation, athletes can become their best. We will strive to get the balance on this right in our programming. The High Performance Training Center will serve all athletes in the region and offer programming that will take them to the next level in their sport. We believe that this regional facility will not only develop, but retain and attract the best coaches and athletes for our community. Over here on the left, you can see kind of our main core function in this facility is a full sheet regulation ice rink, which would sit within the riding arena. And then we'd also offer another compact rink, which is quite popular in emerging sports development around hockey, with about a 60 by 140 size rink. So we'd offer 2 sheets, and there is demand in the community for that as well. We want to really tie in the sports science and analytics, get really technical around helping these athletes understand what the barriers are and what the training plans need to be to help them get to the next level. Offer the fitness, the dry land, dance and yoga studio, and then as well have a gymnasium that has two courts in it for basketball, volleyball, or one full size for competition.
So the location of the facility is really ideal for what we're talking about doing and making it a regional facility. While the facility is not, in the heart of any one municipality, it's within 20 minutes of all the major municipalities outside of Grande Prairie. So within 20 minutes of Sexsmith, Claremont, Grande Prairie, Beaver Lodge, and Wembley, and within 30 minutes of Hythen, Grovedale. So, it is really in an ideal location. Why we feel the opportunity is great for the city and for the project today is the facility is available at, crudely half of the, not the replacement cost, but half of the cost to construct. There's a willingness from private investors to invest in the project today and partner with the city to do that. There's a need for these types of programming in the city, in particular in hockey. Given the lack of availability of ice, if you want to expand or develop any new programs, there's just simply no ice to do it at any prime times. This is a great bang for your buck opportunity. There's simply no way that a facility like this could ever be recreated for even a fraction of the cost. By putting our high performance athletes in one facility that fosters a better environment for them to succeed, it also frees up capacity in our existing recreational facilities to develop more true recreational programming. So it's not just for the elite, it works in conjunction with the other existing facilities, so we can develop more true recreational programs that simply don't exist today. And then, between myself and Jordan and Murray, we have the ability to execute. We've all run large businesses and completed large-scale projects, have led management teams, and we can really get it done. I believe that. Quickly on the economics, we believe the facility will cost close to $8 million. We have the construction budget at $7.5 million and a couple $100,000 of soft costs. We're requesting $4.5 million of municipal funding. We believe the cheapest you could build this building, which wouldn't include many of the things we're proposing today, would be to build it at $200 a square foot. that puts you in at approximately $12 million. So it's a significant saving for the city. These additional facilities are going to need to be built at some point. We believe this creates a great opportunity and incentive to build them now. We're also requesting support on the annual operating costs of $400,000. We believe the facility is going to cost about $900,000 to operate. We'd be looking for half of that in municipal funding. We would build programming and whatnot to support the other half. And last but not least, the path forward. So really, we don't believe this project can work without some government or municipal funding. It's our intent to try and secure that by January of this year. If that was to happen, we would purchase the facility, we would engage consultants immediately, we would start on the development and construction plans. We believe that the significant planning and tendering could be done by the summer, and we could start construction work in the latter part of this summer, and the facility would be fully ready to utilize sort of for the sporting season of 2022. So late in the summer, early in the fall, with some facilities opening in a staggered fashion prior to that. So that's the end of the formal presentation. We're over time, but I appreciate everyone's time this morning, and we'll take any questions.
Thanks very much, gentlemen. I think that you were as brief as you could be, and it was a very concise presentation, so I thank you for that. Are there any questions for the delegation?
I see Councillor Clayton.
Mayor Given.
Yeah, guys, thanks very much. Really cool concept and a great adaptive reuse of a pretty major facility. So I appreciate the regional nature of it and the positioning, you know, as a asset to really all of Northwest Alberta or even all of Alberta, you know, if it's high performance training. So I've got to ask the obvious question, you know, are you, which municipal partners are you making this pitch to? Is it just the City of Grande Prairie? Are you talking to the MD, the county, or any other government funding sources?
Yeah, we prior to today had run this concept by a few council members, and we've done the same out at the county. We haven't sort of got to this next step. Our initial feedback from the county was they would likely recommend this to the Joint Rec Committee, and you know that would be how they would sort of vet the project. And so we wanted to start here today, but absolutely, I would say the city and the county are the two major municipalities that would need to be on board. And you know we're happy to promote and present the project to anyone else into the future.
Just one other, just to follow on that sort of municipal funding, you know, don't underestimate the MD of Greenview. Jordan, you know how much activity there is in the MD of Greenview. You know, although there's some discussion about, you know, some of those revenues that go to rural municipalities, the MD of Greenview certainly has different kind of fiscal capacity than the City of Grande Prairie even. So they should be, many of the regional recreation facilities really are a tri-party kind of arrangement. So make sure that the MD is high on your list as well, I guess, in terms of advice.
Thank you.
Director Miller, I see you've come aboard.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Blackburn. So the thoughts of administration then is to move it to Regional Rec, to the Administrative Working Group, and have a discussion there, and a presentation by Mr. Pomeroy and Jordan as well, and then see where it goes from that avenue. And in talking to Ms. Casrolay, we if necessary, we could call a meeting sooner than later on the Administrative Working Group side. There is an elected officials meeting later this week, but it's not feasible to bring it to that venue. So if committee's in agreement, then we would just ask for a motion to move it to Regional Rec for further discussion.
Thank you. Councillor Bressey, is there anybody in chambers that wants to ask a question of the delegation?
Yes, I see Councillor Clayton, and I don't see anybody else at the moment, but Councillor Clayton would like to get in. Oh, and sorry, and Councillor Thiessen would like to get in too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Blackburn. Good morning, gentlemen. Just a couple questions in regards to the collaboration between athletic groups. tell me if you've had any early discussions with other user groups in regards to hockey, but other sport potentials, and how you see that facility being utilized by more than one or two groups.
Yeah, so I can field that. We've spoken with many of the different hockey groups, Grande Prairie Minor Hockey, Warriors Hockey. We've spoke with Tagged Athletic Gym, and I'm missing a big one, CNG Sports. So those are sort of, I would say, the largest group of high performance hockey users. They all really love the concept. They like the idea of bringing sort of our best talented coaches from different facets into one facility, making it easy for the athletes to access this instead of driving around to 4 or 5 different places to, you know, give these athletes the support they need. I've also spoken with SPVC Volleyball Club. You know, they need a lot of space. They have a lot of teams and a lot of programming that are very interested in it. I may be forgetting some. I've spoke with Swan City Basketball. They're also, everyone has sort of similar challenges as to availability of facilities, and everyone really likes the idea of putting a lot of these facilities in one space so that you could drop an athlete off and they could have a half day, or in some cases, if they're older, even a full day of training at one location. It makes a lot of sense for the athletes, makes a lot of sense for the parents, and it's a great utilization of resources, capital, facilities.
In addition to that, I'll just add, we've talked to Bob Murray, president of GPRC, around synergies. They've started a high performance training center for the Wolves athletes, and the timing might be perfect here, because with the budget cuts, they had to cancel their expansion and their vision of expanding their facility to more programming. And he's really excited to work with us to try and get that and see that a reality out in this facility. So I think some of the things might come together to work really nice. He also offered, they have full-time coaches that could come to this facility and help out too. And of course, that's the big thing that we're trying to get is coaches, developing coaches, athletes, and providing the facility programming to make all that happen.
Thank you. Anything further, Councillor Clayton?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I have Councillor Thiessen and Mary Given. I think you changed your mind about speaking. Thank you. Councillor Thiessen.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair Blackburn, and thank you, Ryan and Jordan, for bringing this forward. I guess I kind of want to tag on Councillor Clayton's question. I heard a lot of the groups that you were discussing that you had spoken with, but over budget and prior to budget, we had a presentation from Derek Van Tassel with the Swan City Football Club. They're looking to create their own sports center as well, and we did give them a little bit of money for those ends to at least see what kind of design concepts they could bring forward. Have you spoken with the Swan City Football Club, and do you see if there's a potential for any synergies with what they're trying to do and what you're bringing forward here today?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the Swan City's project, and I definitely think there's some potential synergies. The type of facility they're trying to build is much more significant and, you know, purpose-built. We don't have a space, I mean, long and short, that it would fit in here. However, I am aware of it. I haven't connected with Derek as of yet, but happy to do so. One thing we do have is a lot of land. You know, I think the facility is open and welcome to all. I really believe the benefit is having multifaceted, multi-sport athletes in one facility, training together, eating together, working on mental performance together. That really creates a culture, and that culture creates momentum. That's what's going to make things spread and grow. So, you know, the more sports we can have in the facility, the better.
Okay, no, that's great. I do have one more question, if I may, gentlemen. Just in regards to the operational model. Now, there's a request for $400,000 potentially, if this were to go through, that the city would be funding probably year over year. Is that just the city? Are you making the same ask of regional partners? And what is the operational model for funding for a center like this?
So the first part of your question, I can answer. That's the gross sum we're looking for. So we haven't tailored this presentation, specifically to what we'd be looking for of the city or the county or the MD. That's what we believe is needed. We also don't believe that that's needed in perpetuity. If the facility can operate and function, we can develop the programming we're looking to into the future. We think that the facility could operate on less subsidy, but certainly to get it off the ground and get it going, and for us to continue to invest sort of the time and effort and the required capital, we need to know we have a reasonable runway to do all the right things and have enough capital to build the programmings appropriately. The second part of your question, I'm not sure I totally understand, but I can tell you our intent is that the facility itself will operate as a not-for-profit. That not-for-profit will offer, we'll have revenue streams in a few different ways. One, by renting its facilities, to different user groups, as I've discussed, and two, by developing certain programming of its own to supplement that, and, selling sponsorship, et cetera, to the facilities, sort of a typical revenue model. We don't believe in the early years, there's enough to sort of make that sustainable, but we do believe, over time, as you bring more groups in, as you can develop more programming, you get the coaches in place, that could be more, could move to a model of sustainability for everyone.
Awesome. It sounds like you understood the second question quite perfectly. You answered it almost in your first response. Just one final question, if I may. Mr. Chair, in regards to other groups and the potential for bringing in other groups, I know that we have a member of the Grande Prairie Curling Center listening in right now. With the ice surfaces that you're proposing on bringing, would there be a potential for perhaps curlers to sort of reside inside of this facility?
I would have to research that. I don't know, but I'm happy to. I'm not certain of the differences, and I know that the difference of the ice topping is very different between curling and a hockey ice sheet, by way of example. But I'm not familiar of the size requirements, et cetera, et cetera. But that's certainly something we're happy to explore if there's weighted multi-use, for some of the ice.
Awesome. Thank you very much for answering all the questions.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the delegation?
Yeah. So first of all, I just note that Councillor Pilat has entered chambers, and Councillor Clayton was hoping to get in again.
Thank you, Councillor Clayton.
Thank you, Chair Blackburn. A question for administration. Director Miller, can you tell me a little bit more on what you're hoping to see from this motion? So committee directs this to the administrative working group of the Grande Prairie Regional Recreation Committee. Then in turn, do you see the Recreation Committee discussing that at the elected official board level, bringing it back to each prospective council? Tell me what you see from the suggested motion.
Thanks, Chair Blackburn. So there is a process that the administrative working group has put in place for facilities that are for consideration as regional facilities. And the first step is to take it to the administrative working group and have a presentation. And then from there, I guess it's determined if the group feels that it is a regional facility. And then if Ms. Casualty is online as well, maybe she could describe the additional steps and the process that we're anticipating it would follow.
Sure, Ms. Casualty.
Thank you, Chair Blackburn. So certainly if there is sort of a matrix and evaluation process that is reviewed for every project. So if it is deemed to be regional, then the information would come back to an elected officials meeting for review and input there, and then we would make recommendations based on that. So certainly it could be direction to go back to each municipality present to their individual councils, or maybe we facilitate something jointly, and then we can also, if necessary, work at a regional level together to move the project forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Miller and Ms. Cajolet. I guess a little bit of my concern as being somebody who sits on that regional rec committee, knowing operationally how the administrative working group brings things to the elected official group, I think it's valuable for each table in regards to the municipality to be updated on it as well. We saw, for instance, in the case of pickleball, that the regional rec facility didn't deem it regional, and then it went back to the respective councils. In my opinion, it slowed the process a little bit before it got back to each respective council. And so maybe it can be noted in the motion, or it can be just, sort of a side note that it would be great to see it specifically at our council table or committee table for that matter, but not just to sort of delay the process by having it at the elected official community rec, or regional rec rather, and then that going on. I'd like to see some subsequent discussion at the municipal tables as well. So if that sort of can be just generally understood, Director Miller, or if you need that in the motion, I'm happy either way. Unless Mayor Given had something in mind in regards to a motion.
Mayor Given?
Well, yeah, I think I'm not sure exactly, Councillor Clayton, what you mean. The group obviously has the opportunity to go and present to their municipal councils if they wish. Sounds like they've been talking to the county. I think that's a good step. And I guess if I was being your strategist, guys, my advice would be make the same pitch to the county and the MD independently, and drive it through the regional rec process. That way you get a chance to answer the questions of the most significant potential funders, answer them directly, and then also allow it to go through this other process. In terms of timelines, I think there's a need to be a bit realistic. Some councils may still be doing their budgeting. The rural municipalities move a little bit differently than the urban ones do. Because oil and gas assessments are so big for them, they actually come in later or early in 2021, early in the calendar year. For urban municipalities, we're mostly done our budget. So that would be the other sort of barrier that council will have to figure out, is if they wanted to fund some portion of this, how they would do that, considering we've just done our budget. It would mean, a change to the budget that we adopted last week. And that's not insurmountable. It's not a reason not to do anything. It's just one thing that just sort of says this isn't there's not cash sitting around to sort of make a quick change on something this substantial. So, Councillor Clayton, to your question, I think it's on the group to go and present to the councils that they want to present to directly. I think we can, so we've heard the direct request. We've had a chance to answer questions. I think we take that action of referring it to regional rec, and encourage the group to go and make their pitches to the other councils. And when you go to the county, you tell them, hey, we wanted to come to you so that we can answer your questions directly. We know that it's also going through this regional process. We support that process, but we want to make sure that we were here available so we could answer your questions firsthand, because not all councillors sit on that regional rec committee. And Councillor Clayton's right, it can sometimes, it is a bit bureaucratic, but that's what happens when you've got 7 municipalities all trying to work together. It's a bit complicated. So I'm not sure that there's a way to get around that. I mean, we can't make the county independently pay attention to this. The group can go and pitch to the county so that they have that direct contact, but we can't make the county or the MD pay attention, other than getting into that regional rec process. And so I don't know, Councillor Clayton, if you want to make that motion about referring to regional rec, go ahead, or I can do it. I'm fine either way.
Yeah, Mayor Given, if you'd like to, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I'd move that the committee receive the presentation for information and refer the project to the Regional Recreation Committee for review, period. And in speaking to that, I think we heard Director Miller say that the quickest way to do that will probably be through that administrative working group, which, would be wise, guys, to make the pitch to the other municipalities so that their administrations are aware of it as well, so it doesn't come in as a big shock to them. And then, I mean, there's a bit of a process, and I have to say you're dealing not just with one government in terms of the city, but you're going to be dealing with a whole bunch of them. And timelines will be a little bit different than you might be used to in the private sector just because of the complication of the different municipalities in our budget cycles. So just be prepared for that. But this is a good first step, and the intent of the motion is to start to move things forward a bit.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Given. Is there any discussion or debate on the motion?
Councillor Blackburn, if I may, and then I see Councillor Clayton again. And then, I see Councillor Pilat too. Just a thought for the group in terms of, I really agree with what's being said of I'd encourage talk to the county and MD directly, but another municipality that isn't as big a funding partner, but might be a significant one to talk to would be the town of Wembley as well. Just what their circumstances are right now is they've got a sheet of ice that due to fire is closed indefinitely, maybe permanently, and this is awfully close to them. So I don't know what their financial situation is, but maybe there's some room in the budget that was set aside for their arena that might be all suddenly available. Or also, if this does get county support, maybe that makes it more difficult for Wembley to get support for their arena. And so just because it's so close and because they're down a sheet of ice, this impacts them. So you might think about approaching them as well. Even though they're not as big a financial player in the region, it might be worth talking to them as well. Just heads up about them being down a sheet of ice.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, what did you say was next? Councillor Clayton, was it?
Yeah, and then Councillor Pilat would like to get into.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bressey and Chair Blackburn. I will support this motion. I think that I look forward to further discussion on it. I think there's a few factors in this, and having sat on the Pursuit of Excellence Committee in the past, and one of the criteria being coach development, being such an essential piece of the future of sport, in the sense that we don't want coaches getting trained moving away to train, much as we consider trades not moving away to train. Coaches are as valuable as well, and many coaches, as you know, in our region are involved in other things. So I think the opportunity for not only developing elite coaches, but recreation coaches as well is very important. As noted by the presenters, the sport side of it, will truly be second to none for what it'll do in regards to the development of our athletes. That being said, as the mayor noted, our budgets are done for this time frame, and this will need some significant consideration. I think there's a great opportunity here, but it definitely, in my opinion, is something the region needs to look at. The MD and the county have a few great facilities, and the city has many great facilities, and together I think we can, it would be a great asset to add to our inventory for the region. So I look forward to further discussions, and today we'll support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clayton. Welcome, Councillor Pilat.
Thanks, Chair Blackburn. Sorry, everybody, for being late. My apologies on that. Thanks, Ryan and Jordan, for continuing your push on this, and it's definitely something I'll be supporting. I was going to make a comment similar to Councillor Bressey about Wembley, but I'm just wondering, and apologies if this has been discussed, I'm just wondering from administration from Grande Prairie, if this is going to the Joint Rec Committee, which it is, and it's the right process. Do we have everything we need to get to the Joint Rec Committee? I know from sitting on that committee for a few years, sometimes things would come to that machine and then it would get stalled there because they were waiting for municipalities to bring information in. So I'm just wondering, is there any information that we need to be gathering, collecting, to get it to where when it gets to the table there that the city's not the group that we're waiting for further information on? So I'm not sure who that'd be, if that's Mr. Miller or Ms. Cajolet, but just so I want to make sure that when we get it to the Joint Rec, because it sounds like this will get approved, that the city's ready to get whatever ammunition that we need to get on there, that we can get whatever information that Joint Rec would need to make further decisions.
Ms. Cajolet.
Thank you, Chair Blackburn. To answer your question, Councillor Pilat, there is an application process that will be required for regional recreation. So administration will work with the delegation to ensure all the required information is available prior to presentation to regional recreation.
Okay, and I guess more specifically that, and thank you for that. I think it's always good to make sure that the paperwork's getting done on that. But I guess more specifically that we kind of know the general outcomes of what's going to be asked from the Joint Rec, of what kind of information they're going to want to see if this is regional or if there's merit to it. I just want to make sure that if we're understanding what questions are going to be asked through the Joint Rec, that we have that information sort of ready to go, if that's possible. And I'm not sure if that's ice utilizations, kind of funding potentials, what those sort of scenarios. I know it's a little bit outside, but again, it was mentioned by Councillor Clayton since I got here, maybe before that. But the Joint Rec has a lot of value, but one thing it has done is it's slowing projects down because it's got so many municipalities involved, and I just want to make sure that the city isn't the one slowing it down if it gets there. So outside of the forum, is there anything else we can do preemptive, I guess, for the delegates to make sure when it gets to the Joint Rec that we have everything, all of our ducks in a row from the city's perspective?
Ms. Casualty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly we'll work on any information that could be perceived as appropriate or applicable for the Regional Recreation Committee. We have already reached out to Sport Connection, and they have been able to provide us with some SEAM reports, so some estimates of the economic impact of larger events that have occurred in the city. So we will have that definitely have available some information related to ice utilization, certainly in each municipality and a little bit across the region. So we'll continue to work on those types of processes.
Okay, that sounds great. That's much appreciated, and thanks for working with the delegates on getting that paperwork in.
Thank you.
If I could just add a comment around timing in relation to fundings that came up a few times around budgets and timings. The operational funding, the facility wouldn't be operational until the fall of 2022. So the end of 22, you'd have maybe a quarter of 2022 of funding, maybe half a year if you're conservative for some startup costs or things like that. And so it's really a 2022, a 2023 sort of time frame. And for capital, no capital would be required until, let's say probably mid part of, 21. And then, most of the capital coming in 2022. I'll clarify that.
Thank you for that little bit of information. It's useful. My own comments on this are that I'm definitely in favor of referring this, and I appreciate the efforts that everybody so far has made to find out how we can expedite this so that there are as few delays, if any, as possible. Is there any other discussion or debate on the question?
Councillor Clayton was hoping to talk.
Councillor Clayton, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Blackburn. Sorry not to slow this process because I think there's support among this committee, but just rather a question for Ms. Casualty in regards to the list of criteria established through the master plan of the regional rec. Is it a public document for the evaluation process? And if so, is there an opportunity to share it with the delegation? I mean, as noted by Councillor Pilat, I'd hate for a score to come out of an evaluation based on a delegation not really knowing the expectation. So is the expectation that you will work with the delegation in preparation for presentation and evaluation, or what does that look like?
Through the chair, absolutely. We'll work with the delegation to prepare them for that process.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If there's no further debate, I will call the question. Those in favor?
So,
Councillor Bressey, what do you have in the council chambers?
Councillor Pilat and Councillor Clayton are both in favor.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. Gentlemen, thank you for your presentation, and I wish you the best for the further progress on this project.
Thank you, everyone, for your time. Look forward to chatting again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks. We'll ask you to turn off your camera and microphone, and we'll move on. give me a moment, folks, to get back to my agenda. Next is the Art Gallery of Grande Prairie delegation. I don't have names, but please turn on your mic and your camera and join the meeting.
Good morning.
Mr. Urbach. Good morning.
It is only me, Jeff Urbach, Executive Director of the Art Gallery of Grande Prairie. Hello. I come bearing gifts, and so I'll be brief. Physically in council chambers, we're providing to the city a COVID-19 timeline, which, and I'll describe very briefly what this is and why this is of any value. So, and there it is up on your screens. You know, when the Art Gallery of Grande Prairie closed on March 19th and we reopened on June 2nd. And when we reopened with a community art installation called The Curve. The Curve was a community response through art to the pandemic. We received hundreds of art pieces from almost 200 separate individual artists. Those pieces involved music, sculpture, poetry, painting, drawing, and more. We were the only museum in the province to reopen with such a project. And so by doing that, we generated a lot of provincial attention. We did a provincial CBC radio interview. We attracted the attention of Travel Alberta, the Alberta Foundation for the Arts, and the Ministry of Culture, Multiculturalism, and the Status of Women, who made a visit to Grande Prairie and stopped in to see the Curve. So this timeline was a part of that exhibition, and it was a timeline of what was happening internationally on the global scale, nationally and provincially, and municipally, from December 31st to mid-May. And so we take this very, very seriously, which is that we serve as an art museum, and so our mandate is to be a cultural archive for what's happening in these extraordinary times. So this timeline is a reflection of that attitude. We don't feel like other organizations are serving this purpose, that they're archiving what happened in this way. And so we're very proud to join you this morning to gift you this timeline, working with your administration, and big thanks to Arlen Miller and his team. We're happy to help install it wherever the city feels it would be appropriate. And we will include a small dedicated plaque mentioning that it was part of the Curve exhibition, and therefore it has interesting archival and educational value for people. So with that, I'm open to any questions you might have. And thank you so much for your continued support of the gallery and our work.
Thank you for that. It's a wonderful looking piece. I look forward to using it. Putting it in an appropriate spot in City Hall. Are there any comments or questions for the delegation?
I see Councillor Thiessen.
Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you, Chair Blackburn. Thanks, Mr. Urbach, for bringing this to council and gifting us with this remarkable piece. When I visited the Curve, I spent a lot of time looking at many wonderful pieces that the community of Grande Prairie provided for that show, and I spent a great deal of time looking at this this timeline in particular. I was delighted and very surprised to see it laid out in this kind of a manner, and I think it's brilliant that you did so, and it's a great piece for us to have here at City Hall. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Thiessen. Any other comments or questions?
If I may, Councillor Blackburn.
Okay. Councillor Bressey, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just curious if there's anywhere that somebody who could see this online right now, with people maybe not being able to get out of their house and go and see it. Is there a good quality picture of this online that people could see, or is it just a physical thing for now?
Mr. Urbach.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. We're still working on shifting all of our attitudes into taking up more virtual space. And so we've made major improvements to our website, and we continue to do that. So the Curve exhibition is, of course, one that we're still building by adding more photography from the actual exhibition and photography of the timeline as well. So it will be available through our website.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And I don't see anybody else in chambers.
All right, thank you. Mr. Urbach, thank you very much again for making your presentation to us. It's much appreciated.
Thank you.
And okay, and I see Mr. Miller, and so I have a feeling that you're about to give your director's report.
That's correct, Chair.
Go right ahead, please.
All right, so thank you very much, Mr. Urbach as well. So I'll start off with CKC and some good news. The Hat Trick Grill is now open. It's a grab and go and takeout business for the time being. It opened up on December 3rd. So we just wanted to welcome Corey Luco to CKC and encourage people to try out the new food service there. And then the CKC Advisory Committee had their first meeting. It was virtually held on November 26th. They elected a chair for that committee. It's Thomas Slivka. And the terms of reference have been worked out and just being finalized. And reportedly, they had a great discussion, some great themes and action items established as well. And then with events and entertainment, with MCC, with the new provincial restrictions, the library and the art gallery are running at about 25% capacity and able to provide all the services to our community. Also, the remainder of the 2020 events for MCC have been rescheduled to 2021. With Revolution Place, Tinseltown Christmas Market ran from November 21st to 22nd and was completely sold out for the two-day event in the specific time slots, which complied with restrictions. And then on November 29th, the annual Christmas tree lighting was live and live streamed over Facebook with a special message from Mayor Given and Santa Claus as well. And it's a collaboration event with the Downtown Business Association. And then with facilities, just an update that they're busy looking after our facilities. So recently they replaced both parkade doors at MCC. They're working on multiple flooring projects in our 3 fire halls. They also replaced the failed sealed window unit in the North Conference Room at City Hall. And then some good news, the colored light system on the sundial at Center 2000 is now operational. And so it's displaying the Christmas theme. It's white, red, and green lights. And we just wanted to say thank you very much to the Center 2000 board for providing the funding to help this out or to make it possible for our community. And then with Fleet, they received a new loader which operates a loader-mounted streets snowblower, and it should be in service here in about a week. And then we also have 2 new Zambonis arriving. These are replacement units next week. Then for sports development, wellness and culture, the RFP for the Activity and Reception Center closed last week. And the evaluations are underway, so that's exciting. I think the public hearing is on the 14th. And by that, by the 14th, 15th, we should know who the successful bidder is, I believe. And then Cindy's Pantry, Bistro and Baking is now open in the Ernie Radbourne Pavilion. And it's a very good addition to that site and to the park overall. So please stop by and try the food there if you have the opportunity. And then we switched our programming to online due to the additional health measures. And reportedly, the change has been well received by registrants and allows children to continue to participate in the weekly classes. And then finally, I'll talk about transit. So Stuff a Bus weekend is coming up December 11th to the 13th. So it'll be parked at Bama Furniture on the 11th, and then Friesen Brothers on the 12th and the 13th. And then as in previous years, transit will shut down on Christmas Eve. The last ride will be from 7:15 in the evening downtown. And then also, due to the provincial restrictions, the transit system is not extending its hours on New Year's Eve, but instead will operate just the regular business hours, so regular weekday hours. Unless there's any questions, Chair Blackburn, that's my report.
Thank you, Director Miller. Are there any questions for the Director?
I don't see anybody else chambers, but I'd like to ask one if I may, Chair Blackburn.
Go right ahead.
just about the lights on the sundial, that's great to hear. I know that there's a hope with some nonprofits in town to use those lights to raise awareness of special months or special weeks or commemorative days. Is there a way that groups can make a request to have them go a certain color at a certain time?
Yep, through the chair, certainly I think that was the intent behind the colored lights, was to accommodate different requests and to highlight different things in our community. So I don't know if we have the process nailed down, but I think Ms. Casually would probably be the best point of contact.
That will go dead.
Well, I guess just my request would be when the process is nailed down, if council could just be made aware, so that we could ask. Oh, and I also see Director Burke is in chambers saying that he might have something to offer, Councillor or Chair Blackburn.
Thank you, Director Burke.
Thank you, Chair Blackburn. They're still really in the testing phase of these lights, but once it is formally a program, it will be rolled out, and the Chamber of Commerce will be managing the program, and so there'll be some more information on how groups can apply to have the lights changed to specific months, and that more information will be coming in the near future.
Thank you, and
Thank you for that.
I don't see anybody else in chambers hoping to ask anything.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Miller, for your report. And we'll now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is emergency community group funding for the Curling Center. Ms. Cajolet is on tap for that.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Blackburn. So the Grande Prairie Curling Center is requesting $100,000 in emergency grant funding. A portion of that would be allocated to pay utility expenses for the center, and the remainder would consist of a cash grant, which will assist the organization to pay staff wages and also monthly bills. So it certainly fits the definition of the emergency grant funding category. So when emergency funding was provided to this organization in 2019, it was prior to this application process being in place. At that time, the city agreed to pay the utility bills going forward and then invoice the curling center based on the actual costs. So that process change has certainly reduced some payment delays and also mitigated the possibility that interest could be charged on the account. So definitely a positive for both organizations. So based on the financial information that was provided by the organization, our finance services department completed a financial analysis and noted that the curling center's current ratio is equal to approximately a 0.6, which is considered to be a poor current ratio and indicates that the organization will likely have difficulty meeting its short-term liabilities. So one thing to note is that the curling center, because it was closed in March of last year, was not able to hold their bonspiel and their largest event of the spring, which is typically held after that time. So a decrease in the number of teams registered for this current season has certainly resulted in some decreased revenue and from both memberships and league revenue. And then restrictions implemented by the province have also shortened the curling season a little bit, which has reduced the opportunity for food and beverage revenue for the organization for 2020. One thing I would like to note is that the organization is currently working with a business advisor. So that consultant has certainly helped the Curling Center prepare for play for this season and is helping them work towards a sustainable operation model. Administration definitely commends the organization for their efforts to reduce operational expenses and promote use of the facility. They're currently open for individual or family bookings at the moment, as similar to lots of our other city facilities, and they're certainly making attempts to market use of the facility for the remainder of the season. So based on review of the application, administration recommends approval of the Grande Prairie Curling Center's request for emergency community group funding in the amount requested. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Casley. Questions for administration? Mayor Given.
Thanks, Councillor Blackburn. Ms. Casual, I think I saw in the report that the recommended funding source was Council Strategic Priorities Initiative. I just wanted to confirm if that's the funding source, and if so, how much was left there. It all sort of blurs together, but I kind of felt that we burned through that during budget discussions. So could you just clarify the recommended funding source for me?
Certainly, through the chair. Mayor Given, Financial Services recommends allocating $85,000 from the Council Strategic Initiatives Fund, and then the remaining funds would be funded from general surplus and fiscal services.
Well, okay, and I guess maybe this is for Director Bork. So was I mistaken? I thought we had asked, yeah, I'm just misremembering how much was left in Council Strategic Initiatives when we closed budget discussions. Can somebody clarify that for me?
Councillor Burke. I'm sorry, Director Burke.
Thank you, Chair Blackburn. All of the strategic fund has been allocated, but we when we'd first considered the emergency funding, we had set aside $100,000 for emergency funding from that. We had spent $15,000 previously, I believe, with the Wolverine, so there was $85,000 that had been allocated but not spent for available for emergency funding. At the time, we'd also talked about having $100,000 additional funding available for emergency requests this year.
And so, is there any additional funding should council receive any other emergent requests from community groups? I guess this essentially drains that amount council had set aside for emergency community group funding. What will the city do if there are other community organizations that we partner with that come forward in earlier in 2021, or if we chose to expend this money here? What funding sources might we have available for any future requests?
Director Burke.
Chair Blackburn, thank you. From the in 2020, we will use surplus funds that we have available. We had set aside 100,000 of that notionally allocated. This taps into that by 15,000, but there's still remaining 85,000 of that funding available in 2020. Should there be more requests?
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Councillor Pilat would like to ask a question. I'm hoping to get in as well.
All right, Councillor Pilat and then Councillor Bressey.
Thanks, Chair Blackburn. Just similar lines of question to Mayor Given there. I'm just curious now. So what do we have allocated for 2021 within the budget? If there was community group funding, would it just be looking at potentially allocating the surpluses of 2020 for 2021, or did we have any money earmarked in 2021 specifically for community group funding for emergencies?
I believe Director Burke, or would it be Ms. Casually?
Through the chair, as part of the community group funding policy, the recommendation was that requests for emergency grant funding would not exceed $200,000 in a year. And certainly that would be a recommendation, and any requests that came in above that would certainly be presented to council for consideration. And as each funding request is submitted, administration works with the finance department to identify an appropriate funding source for that request.
So if I'm understanding that, Ms. Casually, then does that mean we have 200,000 allocated in 2021 for? I'm fine with this today. I just want to make sure, or maybe that's another discussion for council. If we don't have any money for next year, I just want to know what we'd be looking at doing with that for next year specifically. If this is 2020's budget, but 2021 I'm more concerned about now. So maybe Director Bork can handle that one.
So there isn't funding allocated specifically for this. There is some contingency funding built into the budget that could be a source. When we look at wrapping up the year end, we will be back to council to look at what to do, how to transfer the surplus. I think that'd be an appropriate time we'd be in a better, we would have more information on how much we were able to afford, and for that to be brought to council at that time. So I wouldn't recommend setting any aside as we've just passed the budget in the last week here.
And fair enough, if that's an opportunity for us to look at potential, with your organization doing well this year and having a surplus, if that's a potential for us to look at earmarking some of that for 2021, that's something that I would think, because if I'm understanding correctly, if it doesn't get used, it would go back into general revenue, which would be surplus in 21 that we could put in reserves at that point if it wasn't used. But I do think it'd be good for our council to be looking at setting aside money in 2021 for user groups that may have issues that come up in 2021. So support the motion today, but I just want to make sure that we're thinking about how we can maybe build a fund for 2021 as well.
Thank you. Councillor Bressey.
Great. Thank you, Chair Blackburn. And just heads up that Councillor Clayton's hoping to get in as well. A question I've got is, did administration have a conversation with the group about potential federal and provincial funding through all the COVID relief measures? And are we confident they fully explored and accessed funding from other levels of government that might have been available to them?
Thank you through the chair. To answer Councillor Bressey's question, yes, the organization has applied for a number of subsidy programs through other sources and has actually received some of those. So they are certainly exploring all of the options that are available to them.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And sorry, Councillor Clayton.
It was Councillor Clayton. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Blackburn. I'm fine at this time.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding this?
I've not seen any in chambers.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion then, as recommended.
Councillor Pilat is indicating he might be willing.
Thank you, Councillor Pilat.
Thanks, Councillor Bressey and Councillor Blackburn for that. So I would make a recommendation that committee recommends council approve emergency group funding in the amount of $100,000 for the Grande Prairie Curling Center, knowing that I just would like to see this get advanced to council so it can be a conversation with everybody, but I think it's, I'd make the motion today that committee refers it to council.
Thank you, Councillor Pilat. Is there any discussion or debate on the motion?
I've not seen any here.
All right, then I will call the question. Those in favor?
Councillor Pilat and Councillor Clayton both have their hand up.
Thank you. So that passes unanimously. And with that, pardon me while I go back to my... thank you, Ms. Cajolet, for bringing that forward. I see nothing else on our agenda other than the outstanding items list. Director Miller.
Thanks, Chair. So just 2 items on the list, and the regional handy bus feasibility, I'll bring that back the end of March, and then the event center arena business case, we have that slated for June of 21 to provide an update to committee. Unless there's any questions, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. A motion to accept the outstanding items list. Thank you, Mayor Given. No discussion or debate, I would presume.
Not seen any.
In favor. Thank you. Those in favor?
Councillor Clayton and Councillor Pilat both have their hand up.
Passes unanimously, and that concludes our meeting. I'm not sure who's up next.
That's me, Blackburn.
Okay, I'm going to leave the meeting very briefly so that I can switch devices. Thank you very much for your attention so far, and look forward to the next part of the meeting.
Well, now this is starting the, thank you very much, Clyde Blackburn, for the meeting, and now it's our term, Cooperative Service Committee meeting. And with that, we started myself and Councillor Thiessen and Kevin O'Toole and Bill Mayor Given. So first we started with the Shane Burbel update.
Thank you, Chairman Haas. A few brief updates are that from assessment, they're moving to do inspections on properties under construction for December 31st year end. They've also just recently mailed out tax reminders for those who haven't yet paid. The next deadline is January 1st. I'm told that we're a little bit higher in unpaid tax bills from last year, but it's in line with previous years. Last year it was a really great year for how many had paid up to date. So we're not that far off. From finance, the budget passed last week, and the updated budget book will be on the website soon, so that the public can look through with all the final decisions the council made for spending into 2021. And I can confirm that we have received our $7.4 million municipal operating support transfer from the province, so that has made it into our bank account. From GIS, one thing I wanted to mention was there soon will be launching a public-facing GIS service catalog. Our GIS service provides a lot of the data, not just maps, that the city operates on, and many of those are available for public use. And so we're just building out a new catalog that's a little easier to search what data is available from the city in our effort to support transparency. And that's my update for today.
Thank you, Shane. Any question for Shane's update? I don't see here, but Bill? Okay, Calvin. No, thank you. If nobody had a question, so we started 1.2 in December 2020 update Councillor Folks area. Correct. Kezana, could you come please and fill up? Can't hear you. Get it turned on, please.
My apologies. I overlooked turning on my microphone. Thank you, Chairman Haas. The 2017 to 2021 Council Focus Areas chart, which highlights Council's objectives for this term and the actions that administration is taking to achieve those objectives, was presented to Council earlier this year, at which time administration was directed to provide the quarterly updates, and this is the second update that's been presented to Council. Any changes to the milestones or status updates from the September 2020 version are identified with a blue outline, and those that are responsible for the items that are listed are present here today and are available to answer any relevant questions Council may have.
Thank you, Ms. Krishna. Any question for our update? Dylan, no? Nobody on the chamber here, and Bill, I can't see you if you have any. If it's not, then we need the motion for this, I guess.
Nothing from me, Councillor Minhas, so I'd be happy to make the motion to receive the update for information.
Thank you very much, Bill. It's motion on table. No, any question? None. All in favor? We are 3 in the chamber, good, and the bill, yeah, we are all unanimously. Thank you. The next one is 103 borrowing bylaw C 1428 operating line credit. I believe Daniel is off today, and Shane, can you take care of that, please?
Thank you, Chairman House. I'll call my own number on this one. Just as a reminder, in April, Council authorized access to a $35 million operating line of credit to help manage finances through this uncertain year. I can report that we didn't need to access it and have reduced it to $10 million that's currently available to us. The bylaw currently expires at the end of December. In some discussions with our bank this week, we've decided to recommend requesting a $5 million operating line of credit into next year, just to give us some increased options as it's still uncertain. We think this is prudent to continue with this short-term funding option for the foreseeable future. Our lender has offered to continue with our current rate of prime less quarter, and funds will not be drawn down unless finance determines that that's the best option. As always, we would be reporting any use of this option through our quarterly reporting through this committee. So with that, I would recommend that committee recommend council give 3 readings to borrowing bylaw C1428 as presented.
Thank you, Shane. Any question for this update and over 5 million? Kevin?
Yeah, I see there's no questions, so if we're ready, I'd like to make the recommendation, the motion, that committee recommend council give all 3 readings to borrowing bylaw C-1428 as presented. And I really think that this is a good move on our part as the city. And thank you for the accounting department and for bringing this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Motion is on the table. I got a question. You mentioned 3 reading for the 5 million for next year, right? Oh, thank you. Just clarification. Any question on it? I don't see anybody here, but Bill, you are okay? All right. Then a motion on the table. All in favor? We 3 in the chamber. We are in favor. Kevin, me, and Eunice, and Bill. Motion carried. Thank you very much. And next one is correspondence. I think Shane, you're gonna take care of that too, please.
Sure, Councillor Minhas. Mayor Givens received correspondence from 3 members of Parliament asking for the city's endorsement, a formal endorsement of Private Members Bill C-213, which is named the Canada Farmer Care Act. So we thought we'd bring it forward for council's decision or for information to see if there was any direction to administration or if you sought any advice on the motion or the private members bill.
Thank you very much, Shane. Is correspondence anything need a motion? Do we need the motion on this one or just? Eunice, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Huss. I'd like to move that we receive the correspondence for information.
Thank you, Eunice. Motion is on the table. It's all in favor. Eunice, yeah. Motion carried. Unanimous. Thank you, Mayor. The next one is outstanding items. Shane, you're in the hook again.
Thank you, Chairman Haas. We are on track for all 3 items to be brought forward to council on the identified dates, so no changes today.
Thank you. I need the motion, Calvin. Calvin, go ahead.
Yeah, I move to accept the outstanding items list as presented. Thank you.
Motion on the table. All in favor? Yeah, with 3 in the council. I see you, Will. Good. Motion carried. With that, we are done for this committee meeting. Do we need a break for 5 minutes or are we going to carry on with?
I'm fine with carrying on if everyone
All right,
else is
let's
good.
carry on and let's start it with the next meeting. Thank you.
All right, thanks for that, Councillor Minhas. So we'll move on to the Protective and Social Services Committee. On this committee is myself, Councillors Thiessen, Councillors O'Toole, and Mayor Gibbon. So we'll get going on that, and we'll start with our Director's Service update. Director Manuel, please.
Okay, thank you for that. I may need to pop out because I'm dealing with a few things, but if I do, Miss Wendy Hughes will take over, and I have full confidence she's well versed in everything in front of us. But I'll start with community social development. Actually, what you'll see as a common theme amongst Protective and Social Services departments is all of their updates involve COVID-19 presently, as our service area is heavily involved in managing some impacts related to COVID-19's impact on the vulnerable populations, such as our street engaged population, and supporting some of the organizations working with those folks. So nearly all of our departments are involved in that at the moment. Aside from that, it's important to note that an International Day of Persons with Disabilities event was held on December 3rd, and Mr. John Kriska from Better Than Fred's received an Inclusive Community Award. So congratulations to Mr. Kriska, and thank you for his work in that area. Within the fire department, Following Premier Kenny's announcements on COVID-19 restrictions a couple weeks ago, approximately 70 calls were received by the fire department to have the fire prevention branch assist with determining maximum occupancy numbers. So we're pleased to report that we've been able to respond to all those inquiries and help the businesses in the city looking for some information. Additionally, the RCMP report, between June and October 31st of this year, we had 47 occurrences reported through the new online police reporting tool, which means we were the 5th highest number reported using online occurrences within the province. So again, that's a tool that will remind the community exists and try to highlight some more information around it. It does limit the necessity to attend a detachment in person or call the telephone dispatch line. Additionally, the RCMP looks like have had some pretty successful incidents lately where a traffic stop on October 19th resulted in seizure of a loaded 12-gauge shotgun and charges laid against that individual. Additionally, we assisted Grand Cache with an armed robbery that occurred in that community, and the suspects were located fleeing to Grande Prairie and ultimately apprehended. There is one that still remains at large, though, and RCMP continue to investigate. And as a result, on December 1st, the RCMP conducted patrols in the Claremont area where they located a vehicle parked at a gas station with 2 occupants. The investigation revealed that the license plate not registered to the vehicle and that the driver and passenger both had outstanding warrants. A subsequent arrest of those individuals identified a great deal of stolen mail, as well as notebooks, personal documents, and so on. As a result, 59 charges have been laid against those individuals. So at this time of year, it's always nice when people that are stealing mail, parcels, and those sorts of things are apprehended. So good work to the detachment in that regard. And that's the director update.
Thank you for that, Director Manuel. Sorry for that, just having a sidebar conversation there. Appreciate that. Was there any questions for Director Manuel about his update, please? Sorry, but I'm not seeing Councillor Blackburn or Mayor Gibbon on the screen, so I'm not sure if they had their hands up at all. Seeing none, okay. So thank you for that, Director Manuel. We'll move on, and I would look for Chief Preben Bosson, please, to speak to us about medical co-response.
Thank you to the chair. So I presented a report for information, and I'll just go through some of the highlights within the report and speak to some of the background information. So in 1997, the Grande Prairie Fire Department enrolled in the medical co-response program. This was a trend that kind of transpired throughout North America. And what was happening at the time was fire departments were not being kept as busy as they had been, and there was sort of becoming more focus on the pre-hospital care from the medical side. So paramedics were busy and firefighters were not. So it sort of came to a very fruitful partnership, really, to have the fire department respond on some of the calls to assist the EMS staff. So we moved forward with the MCR program until 2015, at which point we switched over to the MFR program, so the Medical First Response Program. A very similar program. This program was housed and administered under Alberta Health Services. So the big difference between the 2 programs really were that under the Medical Co-Response Program, the practitioners had to be registered with the Alberta College of Paramedic, which was a bill about $30,000 for the fire department. By switching to the MRFR program, we saved that money annually. So participation in the MFR program is totally voluntary, and if you look at attachment number 2 to the report, it sort of illustrates the long menu of options that we can pick and choose from. So when you look at the attachment, any medical call that gets placed into 911 and then passed on to the EMS dispatching services, any single call will be slotted into one of these items, menu items, really, if you will. And that's a dispatch protocol that ensures the appropriate level of services responding to the call. You'll note that there are some categories that are called Alpha, Charlie, Delta, Bravo, Delta, Charlie, Delta, Echo. That's kind of how we group some of those calls together, and I'll speak a little more to that a little later on in the report. In the very right-hand side, you'll see some red and blue-colored fonts with the words cold and hot. So a cold response basically means we drive without lights and sirens, we stop for all traffic lights and stop signs, and we obey with all the rules of the road. A hot response means lights and sirens, and a faster response, obviously. So I just want to mention briefly the attachment 3 is a list of fire departments that are currently working within the MFR program. I think there's 309 departments. I think there are roughly 435 departments in Alberta. So the majority of fire departments do work under this program and support EMS. Sort of moving on, so there's kind of the different categories under the analysis in the report. So Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and Echo. So in 2015, when we switched over to the MFR program, we did respond to some of the Bravo calls, Charlie, Delta, and Echo calls. And when we look in the description under the Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta calls, some require a basic life support and some require an advanced life support. So that's strictly the level of training at which the EMS personnel is trained to. And then on the right hand side, the response resources are illustrated there. So again, it speaks to the cold and hot and response and how many units should respond. Under the Echo calls, which are the most severe calls, it speaks specifically to first responders and multiple units, so fire is listed there as well. That's not the only place where fire can play an important role, so we'll kind of see that moving on in the report. So over the years, we kind of monitored our participation in this program, both from a time commitment, but also monetary commitment. We also looked at our stats, and we also looked at sort of the outcomes of the calls we participated in. Oftentimes, you would get calls canceled either en route to the call or as soon as we got on scene and really were not needed. So on January 1st, 2020, we made a decision to reduce the number of calls we were responding to. So we dropped the Bravo calls and some of the Charlie calls, just trying to make sure we were utilizing our resources where it made sense. Then on March 27th, we pretty much dropped all our calls except for heart attacks and choking calls, and that was due to the COVID. We wanted to reduce the potential exposure to our staff to ensure we could maintain proper staffing levels throughout the pandemic. As we sort of move forward and ensured a supply of PPE and the numbers kind of seemed to stabilize, and we had good solid protocols in place with Alberta Health Services for these types of calls. we started going back into doing more calls again. So on August 1st, we included the Delta calls in our response plan. So basically, we went into that menu and selected those calls in those categories, and then we would obviously get dispatched to those calls if they're within the city. Our plan is to kind of maintain the August 1st level of response moving forward, unless COVID call numbers increase to the point where we fear that the exposure is getting too great and we might have to pull back again temporarily. In terms of response times, I know that was one of the questions. So response times are not directly affected because Alberta Health Services are the initial and the primary responders. So they have their response times, and then obviously we have our response times. And for medical calls, Alberta Health Services track that obviously, and it's important to them. For us, it's important, but not quite as important, being that we're not the primary provider. Where it does become important is when we're first on scene. And you'll see the graph that I'm speaking to is on page 2, kind of in the bottom portion of the page. So this is just for 2020. So you can see January, February, March, we had a relative high number of being first on scene. So 27, 15, and 18 times. And above, you'll see the average wait time. And then moving into April, May, and June, and July, we dropped down to 1 per month. And then July, we had 0 times where we were first on scene. And then again, kind of moving into the August, September, October, those incidents increased again. So those kind of follow suit with sort of the number of calls we go on. Obviously, we go on a lot of calls. There are more times we were first on scene. If we don't go on any calls, there's less chance. What happened a few years ago was Alberta Health Services would use code red to indicate they did not have any units available, and we would sort of get dispatched to fill the gap. Now they've made some changes, so they don't actually call code reds anymore. What they do is they still have a unit available. They're just rerouting it because of their provincial network. So we kind of took it upon ourselves to keep track of these stats. One of the things we are concerned about is get into a position where we really deliver their service and they sort of lean on us too heavy to take care of their business. We certainly don't mind helping out, and we understand at times they will not have an ambulance readily available and it has to get rerouted, and we don't mind filling those gaps. But there also has to be a sort of point where it's their service and they sort of need to own it. So that's kind of part of the ongoing considerations we have with this program. I anticipate we'll sort of look at 3 to 5 incidents per month where we'll be first on scene. And obviously that can happen for several reasons. One is we have 3 fire stations in the city. So sometimes the call is very close to one of the fire stations and we can get there quicker, or the ambulance is tied up at another call and they have to reroute. When these incidents happen, it's very important that we get there quickly, and as you can kind of look at the task of a task that we often complete when we are first on scene, they're very important tasks on those very critical calls. Sort of another time that they might call on us is getting access to a patient. So if a patient lives in an apartment building and cannot get to the intercom to unlock the front door, EMS will call on us to bring a key. So we have a key placed in a secure box on the building that we can then open, and then we have master keys for buildings, and we can gain entry into the building and into the suite to allow EMS to take care of the patient. then we kind of get into a little bit of the cost associated with delivering this program. So there are a couple of graphs there, and I'll focus on the overtime first. So as I talked a little bit about earlier, our staff is on duty. So we don't bring in staff just for the medical calls. We do run into overtime sometimes when a crew is attending a call that go past their end of the shift. So we're tracking that the best we can, and that's the blue columns in the graph. So if you kind of look at 2019, it's sort of fairly stable throughout. It fluctuates a little bit, but we have some pretty decent averages we can kind of determine there. Then we get into 2020, of course. The first 3 months, as you recall, we were involved at a higher level in the program than we were after March 27. So you'll see the overtime drop off drastically during April, May, June, and July, and into August. And then in September, October, it's bouncing back a little bit. So we've been trying to sort of determine some averages and then some estimated cost savings kind of through that time period when we didn't respond to very many calls. The kind of pinkish colored graphs are fuel costs. So you'll see there's a note there that we removed May and June from 2019. And you'll see there were a couple months where our fuel consumption spiked. We had units deployed in high level for the Chugate Creek fire complex. So we had staff traveling back and forth at times when they sort of traded off each other. And we obviously had some fuel costs associated with that went into this graph. Those fuel costs were recovered when we invoiced the province for our hourly rates of those units, which included the fuel allowance. So we did recover that money, but it shows up here and then kind of throws off our graph a little bit. So that's why I removed those 2 months from the graph on the fuel cost. And again, we'll see a bit of a drop in fuel cost in the months where we were not as active. Again, this is fuel cost for all our fleet, so it gets a little difficult to sort of decipher exactly how much is related to medical calls, excuse me, and how much is oil calls and sort of day-to-day use of the vehicles. You'll see some estimated annual savings below. So I kind of anticipated there would be a question: how much does the medical co-response program cost us? So really, this is probably my way to answer that. So if you were to cancel the medical co-response of the our program, altogether, we would probably see an estimated savings of $50,000 between the overtime and the fuel costs. So the final attachment in there, there's relevant statutes and master plan city documents. There should be a correction in this report. That attachment is 4, not 3. So that is 803, the city policy that establishes the level of service. To mitigate some of the risk during this time, we also had an agreement with Alberta Health Services that they could call us anytime for assistance. Sometimes they call us for a lift assist, we call it. So that is if they need to remove a patient from maybe a basement suite with a narrow, steep stairwell, or maybe upstairs, or many different scenarios where our firefighters assist with moving the patient from their location to the ambulance. We also reached out to Alberta Health Services and kind of asked their feedback on sort of what was the impact of us withdrawing from the program. They recognized that it was a valid question, and they promised they'd get back to us, and we never did hear back from them. So unfortunately, I sort of can't share their view of it. I know from what I hear from our staff that's working out there with the Alberta Health Services staff, that the paramedics on the units on the front line, they really did miss our firefighters go out and assist with improving the patient care and ensure that everybody was sort of looked after. So summary conclusion, our recommendation is that we continue to participate in this program and that we continue at the level that we established August and then continue to monitor. There is an opportunity to include some of the Charlie calls if we find we need that, and we'll work with Alberta Health Services to kind of fine-tune that perfect balance really between calls that we go to and calls that we do not go to. So thank you for allowing me to present this report, and I'm certainly open to any questions.
Okay, thanks for that, and definitely a lot of detail in this report, which I always appreciate detail, so thanks for that. Any questions for Chief Boss? Councillor Bressey, and then Councillor Friesen, please.
Great, thank you. I got two questions, if I may. And the first one is just, can you help me understand a little bit more how it works in terms of if a call comes in for service from an ambulance, does a fire truck automatically go out and we just see who's going to get there first? Or does a fire truck only go out if dispatch realizes, oh, an ambulance might not be there as quickly as we would like?
Thank you for the question through the chair. So the process is if a 911 call is placed, it gets answered in our region, obviously, in the Grande Prairie Fire Department's 911 call center, by the PSAP. So the caller requests an ambulance. So that call would then be transferred to Peace River, where Alberta Health Services call answering point is, or dispatch center is. That dispatcher will then collect all the information from the caller to be able to establish what the dispatch determinant is. So that would be one of the determinants in that attachment number 2. So it's quite a complex process where through questioning, and they use a card set, they arrive at a dispatch determinant. So then once they have that dispatch determinant for the city of Grande Prairie, they will dispatch Alberta Health Services with an ambulance to that call. Also in that response plan will be a note that fire also responds. So then the call would come back to our dispatch, who then would notify our trucks and say, you need to go on this call, and we would then get the dispatching information. So typically the ambulance will have a bit of a lead time on us because they get their first in queue on a medical call. And then through the protocols, we would then get assigned that call. So it's not sort of a race who gets there first and, no, this is my call, you can't have it. It's actually very organized through protocols.
Oh, I can hear you.
The dispatch centers.
You couldn't hear me. I take it.
Sorry, there's just somebody jumping on line there. If you could just please mute your mic. Sorry about that.
No worries. Hopefully that answered that question, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, and sorry, maybe I just need a second cup of coffee, but I'm still not quite understanding. So I guess my question is a fire truck being sent every single time an ambulance gets requested in our community? Or is a fire truck only being sent if there's not an ambulance that's going to get there very quick?
Thank you through the chair. So basically there are two scenarios. We could get sent if there's no ambulance available. And the second portion is that we only get sent if that call has been predetermined to require fire. So we do not go on all the calls. And that's sort of where we group the calls together in the different categories, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie. We will now only go if it's a a Delta or an Echo call, so the most critical calls.
And sorry, so I guess I'm still kind of confused. And so then, yeah, so I appreciate that you're only going on those more severe calls, but every time there's an echo call comes in, is a fire truck automatically going every time an echo call comes in Grande Prairie? Or is a fire truck only going into those echo calls where we know that an ambulance might not be available to get there quickly?
Through the chair, we would go on all echo calls.
And is that I know that there's other communities of the province where, well, until recently or until the very near future, where the municipality's been doing dispatch. So, for example, Calgary's one of them where the municipality's been dispatching ambulance, if I'm understanding right. And with that integration, do you know if those municipalities were also sending fire trucks on every single medical call, or were they able to prioritize whether or not a fire truck needed to go?
Through the chair, I believe they follow the exact same protocols as we do. I think the only difference there is that they have the dispatch in-house, but it's still following the same protocols as Alberta Health Services use. And maybe just to clarify, through the response plan, we do prioritize which calls we go on. And when we talk about echo calls, those are heart attacks or perhaps where there is no pulse, there is no breathing, and CPR will be in progress or whatever. So we know there's a big demand for a lot of help right off the front. So we have sort of prioritized, so we don't go on all the calls, and it's really only the very few that's very serious calls that we go on.
If I may. Thank you. And then just one last question to make sure I'm understanding the report right. So when I look at page 2 of the report, where there's how many times a fire truck got there before an ambulance, I know that my understanding is those numbers are just, that's not all the calls that fire trucks went out on. Those are just the calls where fire truck got there first. And then I'm looking at the second page, at the next page where there's the total cost of this program. Would that be the total cost for every single time a fire truck went out, or would that just be the cost of the times a fire truck got there first?
That would be the total cost for the program.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you, Chair Pilat. Chief Boss, and thank you. This is a really well laid out report, and I appreciate how you've quantified things for us. You're absolutely right that one of the concerns is, what is this costing the city? And I confess I did anticipate that the hard cost would be quite a bit more than it is. So I'm pleased to see that. But I have a question also kind of about that capacity or resource cost that is intrinsically a part of these kinds of programs. So there is the financial burden, of course, but every time a truck goes out, there's the wear and tear on the vehicles, there's the lost time doing the other work of the day that our firefighters have to do in order to do their jobs safely for themselves and for residents of Grande Prairie. So my question to you is, with respect to that kind of burden, the lost time spent at the other work of the day that needs to be done, I guess I'm looking for a characterization. Would you say that the medical co-response is burdensome to other activities of the day? Are there times when, I'm sure there are times when the crew says we couldn't get things done today because of whatever, but does that create an undue burden on the work of the fire halls?
Thank you for that question, and through the chair. Certainly at times, as you know, we cannot sort of schedule calls, so sometimes you're really busy, and other times there's a little more luck in calls. But I think where we used to be, it was becoming a burden, and we were struggling to get some of the other things completed. That's also very important. So that was also part of the equation we looked at when we scaled back in January of of this year. So I think moving forward with sort of the revised plan, I think we found a good balance, and I would sort of like to go through a full year sort of at that level and evaluate sort of towards the end how that balance is. But I think you're absolutely right. It was becoming a burden, and it was taking up a lot of time. And I'm probably okay taking up a lot of time, and I think most of our staff are, if we sort of delivering value-added service. But if you go on 5 calls in a row and we get canceled, when we get there, then we sort of all know that that's not really good use of time. So we sort of taking that approach that we will not respond on all as many calls. We will reduce the number of calls, and if we really are needed, then EMS or Alberta Health Services through the ambulance can call us, and we'd be happy to assist. So I think we found a good balance, and I think that'll take care of the burden that we have experienced.
Thanks for that. I appreciate it. And so I guess I'm hearing, and I want to ask, in your estimation then, is the flexibility that you have to adjust response within the program as it stands, is that flexibility enough that you're comfortable with the program as it is?
Through the chair, there is very much flexibility in this program, and we can simply select or unselect the type of calls we want to go on. So that is one very positive part of this program is during COVID, we basically shut down 95% of the program and said we're not taking part for the next little while, and now it's accepted, and the adjustment is very easy to do. We can do it online or through an email to the program administrator. So absolutely, it's a very good program to work with in that regard. Lots of flexibility, for sure.
That's good to hear, and thank you very much. I wasn't aware that there was flexibility in there, and I appreciate that you've adjusted over the past better part of a year now. And thank you for this presentation today, Chief Bosson.
Okay, thanks. Councillor O'Toole, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pilat. Fire Chief, I just have a couple of questions, and once I do want to thank you for this very informative report. A number of years ago, I attended a convention, and it was all throughout North America. And one of the concerns was in BC, where there was a larger distance to travel to pick up patients, and it was a burden on the fire department. And my question is to you. The city employs the firemen, and some of them are trained in 2 trades, I guess you could call it, being a firefighter as well as a paramedic or an EMS. Do you think there will be, in the near future, where the fire departments will actually employ paramedics to go out on calls and actually do their job as a paramedic, not necessarily as a fireman? You think that'll be coming soon in the near future?
Thank you for that question, and through the chair. I don't see that coming anytime soon in the city of Grande Prairie. And when you look throughout Alberta, so Alberta Health Services is a provincial service. They do have contracts with a few municipalities to provide that service. So I think Wood Buffalo, Red Deer, Lethbridge, and Calgary currently do that. There are a few others as well. I don't see us going in that direction. I think that would be certainly a decision that would be made probably even at council or above. So I don't see the model that we currently have changing in the near future. I certainly appreciate there's sort of the crossover between the two professions. And sort of as we move forward, I think we trying to find what is right level for our staff to be involved with the medical calls. And I think we sort of arrived at a good entry point, if you will, where we can take care of a lot of tasks and some life-saving skills that our staff have. We do not have ambulances, so we cannot transport, but we can certainly do a lot of good things when we get on scene first. When I first started, we did not do any medical, and I felt that was always a mistake, because as a firefighter, you do come across people that require medical assistance. Without sort of some background, I think there's a big void. So I think we're in a much better place now, and I think our staff is kind of trained at the right level, and I don't really think the service model will change. Probably not in my career anyways.
Thank you very much for that answer. I appreciate it.
Thanks for that. Any further questions for Chief Bosson? Okay. Councillor Friesen would like to put a motion forward.
Thank you. I move that we accept this report for information.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Friesen. So we'll call the motion. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you for that. Thanks for the presentation, Chief Bosson. Always good to have some time with you. We'll move on to our item 1.3, our Canadian Mental Health Association request. Wendy Hughes is going to present that, please.
Good morning, and thank you through the chair. On November 9th, Council received a letter from the Canadian Mental Health Association whereby they requested Council to forgive an outstanding balance of what they believe to be $86,102.42 for Willow Place, or alternatively have the city complete a title transfer as a gift in kind in order for CMHA to proceed with future building development. Subsequently, on November 24th, the Protective and Social Services Committee directed administration to present options to respond to this request. As the Willow Place project has a very long history, I will provide a brief overview of key developments on this project, which formed the basis of our recommendations. In 2003, CMHA and the city developed a $1.3 million affordable housing building known as Willow Place. This project, the city owned the land and CMHA owned the building, and the two parties shared any revenue from the project. This project also received a $950,000 grant from the province of Alberta. It is important to note that the grant requires CMHA to use Willow Place as an affordable housing unit until May of 2023, or the full $950,000 grant is repayable to the province. Later in 2019, CMHA and the city agreed to a land swap, so CMHA could refinance the building and finance a new build. The city-owned land was worth approximately $114,000 more than the CMHA-owned land. Therefore, in support of the new build, the city agreed to forego compensation for the land value difference. Further, in November 2019, administration provided a letter of support for CMHA's Willow Place Studios projects, outlining the city's land exchange, waiving the municipal fees of approximately $30,000, as well as the tax waiver of approximately $52,000 annually. The letter was intended to support CMHA's application to the Canadian Housing and Mortgage Corporation for seed funding. Administration also provided a proposal to Alberta Seniors and Housing, requesting that they allow the city to assign the grant agreement to CMHA and that they support CMHA's refinancing of the project. The transfer agreement was then signed by the province of Alberta in February of 2020. By the fall of 2020, administration was informed that unfortunately CMHA had withdrew their seed funding applications for Willow Tower and Hope Tower. As well, CMHA's regular monthly payments of $3,500 were not received by the city since March of 2020. Administration has been working with CMHA since September to resolve the outstanding installments. Further, and in consideration of CMHA's request on November 9th, administration determined the accurate outstanding balance is $100,471.20. As well, there is an additional $5,500 penalty from the Alberta Capital Finance Authority to repay the loan early. After the review of the project and the partnership on this project for over the last 17 years, administration has identified 4 possible options for council's consideration. Number 1, CMHA pays the current arrears and continues with the monthly installments of the balance of the loan. Number 2, the city forgives the current arrears and CMHA continues with the monthly installments. Number 3, the city assumes responsibility for the monthly installments of the loan term, and then administration would request CMHA sign a new agreement so that the city can register against the title of the building, which requires CMHA to continue meeting the grant requirements until the end of May of 2023. And finally, the last option is that the city pays the loan in its entirety in a lump sum of $100,471.20 plus the $5,500 ACFA penalty. Administration would also request that CMHA sign a new agreement stating that they would abide to the grant agreement requirements until May of 2023. In conclusion of this review, administration supports option number 4, subject to CMHA bringing forward a financially viable, affordable housing project supported in part by the Willow Place refinance and forgiveness. This option would reinstate CMHA's commitment to the community while providing new opportunities for supportive housing. So with that, administration recommends that committee recommends that council support the payout of Willow Place loan in a lump sum of $100,471.20 plus the $5,500 penalty subject to the conditions we identified. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you for that, Ms. Hughes. Any questions for Ms. Hughes on this? So, sorry, I'm not seeing Councillor Blackburn or Mayor Given on the screen, so I'm not sure if they have any questions. So I'll just ask one before that. I'm just curious. I appreciate looking at us paying out the loan. I guess I'm wondering what the urgency to pay the loan out if it's to incentivize a new build. Was there any discussion around paying out the loan when the actual new construction started? Because I would think that's when they would actually, that's when draws and mortgages and stuff would start being allocated. I'm just wondering, if we pay out the loan, is there anything that guarantees them that they're actually going to go ahead with this project?
Yes, thank you through the chair. That's why we would substantiate that they would have to have a substantiated project and as well as the start date available to us.
Okay, so it's at this point, the way administration's looking at it wouldn't be triggered to development permits or physically hole being dug or some other thing. It would be more just once they had a project that looked viable. I see Director Manuel with a hand up there.
Yeah, just 2 points of consideration in regarding the timing of it. First, one of the funding sources that the administration would be looking to utilize to meet this request would be 2020 operational surplus, potentially. So there is some time sensitivity to that. And additionally, it's our understanding that CMHA's intent is to pursue federal rapid housing initiative dollars. which again have a December 31st timeline associated with them for application. So there is some time considerations, but certainly there's options.
Okay, thanks for the clarification on that. Councillor Minhas?
Thank you, Chair. Wade, my question is, this is the project we're talking about, this, if I remember right, is 32 units going to be right based off that old building? They got about a couple lots up there, I wonder. That's the one?
I'm not sure if Ms. Hughes wants to answer that, or?
Yes, that's correct. That is the build they are referring to.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other questions, Councillor O'Toole?
Yep. And thank you for clarifying that, Councillor Pilat, the question that you asked earlier. I move that committee recommend council support the payout of the Willow Place loan in a lump sum of $100,471.20 and the $5,500 penalty subject to the conditions identified by administration.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Councillor O'Toole. Any discussion or debate on the motion? Seeing no hands go up on Zoom or in chambers here, I will call all in favor. And that passes unanimously. Thank you for that. Thanks for the presentation, Ms. Hughes. So we'll move on to our Chamber of Commerce had sent us a letter about affordable housing project. I believe that's what Director Manuel is going to give us a verbal update on next, please.
Correct. So it had been administration's intent all along to roll the chamber request into an overall approach to affordable housing projects in the city, which we were going to bring forward in the way of the revised affordable housing strategy and some tactics to accompany the strategy. The hope was that we would actually be here today to provide that update, but obviously some events within the community that Protective and Social Services is responding to has slightly delayed us on that at the moment. But I did want to come back and advise that the Chamber's the Chamber's proposal has been thoroughly reviewed by administration, and we certainly believe components of that will form part of the updated affordable housing strategy that will be coming forward very shortly from Mr. DeRoche and myself. So I just wanted to provide that update right now that it certainly hasn't been lost upon us that we are incorporating components of that into the overall strategy, which we've been doing a great deal of stakeholder consultation and receiving feedback around various aspects. And this will form part of the complete package as opposed to an individual isolated proposal. So I'm free for any questions around where we're at with that right now or what's happening.
Okay, any questions for Director Manuel? Seeing none in chambers, I just had one, Director Manuel. Would there be conversations about funding sources for these types of programs, or where would that come into the conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we've done is there was some tweaks that council had previously requested regarding the affordable housing strategy, which we've made. But more importantly, we wanted to create a path for 2021 where council will really be able to action a number of the items to further the yardstick on this portfolio, knowing that it's a top priority of council. So when we come forward, not only are we going to identify the strategy, we'll have tactics to meet the strategy and funding sources allocated to each of those tactics. So it's a really robust plan that will be actionable, not just something that's theoretical.
Okay, thank you for that. I guess this is a verbal update. Do we need to be receiving anything for information on that, or is it just a verbal update? It's just like our normal verbal update. Ms. Karbashewski or somebody's online, I just don't know if I need to receive anything for information on that.
Thank you, Chair Pilat. It's not necessary, but we have gotten into the habit of receiving these verbals. verbal updates for information in the past.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Amanda. Seeing that, I see Councillor O'Toole's got his hand up.
I will make that motion to accept this report.
Okay. Thanks for that, Councillor O'Toole. So we'll call that. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously for you, Amanda. Thank you for that. And we'll move on to, we'll keep Director Manuel's mic off here, and he can maybe update us on the outstanding item list, please.
Perfect. Thank you. Just taking a look at the list, I think we can safely remove item 1131, which was the CMHA request. I also recommend that we remove item 1113, the medical co-response. We will provide an updated date on the chamber to coincide with the affordable housing strategy. And item 1117, which is the Indigenous liaison worker, we actually had prepared a report for this meeting, but upon subsequent discussion and communication with some other organizations, we're just looking to explore out a couple opportunities that may have arisen. So we expect this one to come back in short order, so I will provide a revised date on this one for a future meeting. But I said all other items look to be on track, and I suggest that we receive the outstanding items list as amended.
Okay, thanks for that, Director Manuel. Any questions or somebody want to entertain a motion? Councillor Friesen, please.
So moved.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Friesen. All those in favor? Just can't see Mayor Gibbons. There we go. Thank you for that. And with that, that passes unanimously as well, Amanda. And with that, we'll close off the Protective Social and Services Committee, and we'll move on to the Infrastructure and Protective Committee.
Great. Well, I was just going to say, I don't think the next one's long, but we have been going for over 2 hours. Should we take a 5-minute break? Is 5 minutes enough?
Sounds
good.
Well,
we always think a little bit, and it's 11:08, so why don't we start at 11:15? All right. Well, it is 11:15. I don't see Councillor Blackburn or Mayor Given online yet. Are you guys back with us? All right, I see you. And just for a recording secretary, everybody else is in chambers right now. So with that, I will call the Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee meeting for December 8th to order. And we will start with the Director Service Area update, and that is Director Glavin.
Thank you, Chair Bressey. We'll start with economic development. For our economic development recovery grants, the local marketing grant has currently awarded $63,000 to 22 projects with an approximate value of $146,000. The beautification grant has awarded $108,000 to 9 projects for a total value of approximately $486,000. And a couple of the notable improvements that you'd likely see driving around would be the new window installation at Mad Hatter's, as well as the facade improvement at the Jackpot Grill. With the Get in the Loop program through the Chamber of Commerce, they currently have 42 local partners, 4 national partners, and currently there are 1,500 people who have downloaded the program or the app to date. As well with the Chamber of Commerce, Economic Development co-hosted a webinar yesterday with the Chamber on digital strategies for small businesses with the president of Get in the Loop. The Serving Up Knowledge series focuses on actionable tips and tricks for businesses that are adjusting to the digital marketing. The Business Resiliency Task Force is hosting 2 upcoming webinars, the first with Community Futures this Thursday, and this will be on the new and updated supports available for small and medium businesses. The second will be with Myers Norris Penny and information on the revised government subsidies for businesses, including the Canadian Emergency Rent Subsidy and the Emergency Wage Subsidy. This session will review eligibility requirements, how the subsidies are calculated, the application process, and any other associated factors within those applications. As well, the task force has launched the Love Local GP social media campaign, which will run until January 10th, with weekly prizes that encourage residents to share the ways they support local businesses. And lastly, on the ECDEV side, Economic Development co-hosted a roundtable session with the Business Council of Alberta last week and heard from 15 senior Grande Prairie leaders from a variety of industries and organizations. Moving on to engineering, we've posted the traffic signal design RFP, the storm outfall rehabilitation, and the geometric upgrades and the traffic signals RFPs for next year. And we have recently closed the Bear Creek outfall repair design that will repair a number of outfalls along the Muskogee Park Bear Creek corridor, as well as the slope repair program adjacent to a number of the pedestrian bridges and one of our vehicle bridges. In transportation, we're currently piloting a preemption program for our snowplow operators when they're plowing an echelon formation, which is essentially just more than one snow removal vehicle at the same time. So if you're on an arterial road, you may see 3 to 4 snowplow trucks following each other. And one of the things that is necessary in order to plow in an echelon formation is that you can't get split up. And one of the challenges that we have is that when you come to a set of lights and half the trucks get stuck behind you, it does create some operational challenges for that type of snow removal. So what we're piloting is giving them preemption ability so that when they approach an intersection, they can get all the vehicles through without a red light. So we're piloting that right now, collecting some data, and hopefully that can make our crews more efficient so that we can get more roads done faster. In parks, the city-maintained toboggan hills are good to go, although this temperature is not helping things. Muskogee trails are plowed, and we're seeing a heavy usage on the trails this year. The city's outdoor rinks, as well, we've made some progress, but the temperatures, again, being as warm as they are, aren't helping, but it looks like we're returning to more seasonal temperatures here later in the week. And that's my report.
Excellent. Thank you, Director Glavin. Are there any questions? Great. I'm not seeing that. So with that, I'll move on to the next item of business, which is door-to-door sales. And it's actually something that I asked to add to the agenda that I wanted to talk with committee about. And where this comes out of is, I won't tell the full story again, but it comes out of an experience I had about a year ago where a door-to-door salesman offered what seemed like a good deal at my door. And then between the time I signed a contract and it got submitted to his head office, he changed the price. He penciled in a different price, and I had a heck of a time canceling that contract. And then I went out to the community, both on social media, but also talked to a bunch of people in real life and saying, was I an idiot who just hit a really bad door-to-door salesman, or is this something that's happened elsewhere? And I heard a number of stories from people in our community who have had similar experiences of sometimes outright fraud, sometimes just really convincing people that sold them something that wasn't everything it should be. And most concerning, I heard from a number of seniors in our community that had been what I'd consider victims of not appropriate behavior at their door. And I got out of mine because I'm aggressive like that and I was able to figure it out. I heard from people who weren't able to get out in the same way I was able to get out. And something that I wasn't aware of till months later, and I don't think any of the people I heard from was some of the rules around door-to-door sales and some of the provincial legislation, some of the provincial protection around door-to-door sales. And for me, I think that it was honestly part of the reason I trusted the person who showed up at my door was because they had a City Grande Prairie logo and on their license that the City Grande Prairie gave them. And that gave them a sense of legitimacy. And so for about the last year, I've wanted us to do something to better protect our residents since we're putting that stamp of legitimacy on door-to-door sales. I haven't brought it up because I knew we were going to be reviewing business licensing. And it seemed to me that the most appropriate place to look at this is through a business licensing framework. And for me, there's no point in doing anything else if our business licensing bylaw wasn't okay. So I waited till that business licensing bylaw actually got to council before I went and researched what other municipalities were doing and what else was happening across the province. And just through my research, I think we've got a good business licensing bylaw now for door-to-door sales. But I think we could do more to equip our residents to know what the bylaw is, what provincial legislation is, and what recourse they might have if they have a problem at their door. And so I'm hoping right now, if you look at our city website, under business licensing, there is a paragraph or two about door-to-door sales, but it's not something that's easy to find. I don't think it's something a lot of our residents would be aware of. And I would love to see us make sure that our website is up to date with information residents might have, but also use a bit of our social media presence and a bit of our ability to get word out to the community just to equip people to know what to look for at the door and what their rights are. And so I'm hoping that committee will help deploy some resources that I don't think are expensive for the city to deploy to help our residents be equipped to not be scammed if somebody shows up with a City Grande Prairie logo on their license. And so I can't make a motion here, but I'm hoping that one of my colleagues on this committee will. Somebody have a comment, or is Mayor Given?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Bressey, for being willing to bring this to committee. I think that was my recommendation to council, and appreciate the importance of this and the utility of it. I guess the question for administration would be about the amount of work required to do the actions that Councillor Bressey proposed to council and discussed here. Is that a significant expense? How much staff time would it take? I think generally we would be supportive, but before directing the administration to undertake something, would like to have a sense of the level of complication and cost associated.
I see Director Burke's ready to hop in on that.
Thank you, Chair Bressey. This would be a manageable request. This is part of an afternoon, so this is something that we could accomplish. One thing I would mention every time we get requests like this, I'll bring forward that as a standalone request, it is manageable, but there is a cumulative impact if we have a number of these requests coming towards the communications department. So I'll just remind when these come up that I'll make that as these build, that there could be a significant impact to the resources we have. I'd also just a caution when we have requests like this is that we have been hesitant to add content that we don't control the policy on, and that adds another layer of keeping it up to date. But with this request, we feel that it is manageable, and it would only be a few hours work.
So Chair Bressey, with that in mind, I'd be happy to make a motion to, direct administration to undertake this work. I think I would, in doing that, before I sort of frame the motion, I think in doing that, I would also do it in such a way that it shows up on the outstanding items list. Not because we were expecting a report back, but just so that the outstanding items list, in my mind, is intended to be able to show council some of the work that we've directed administration to undertake. And it is a good way to kind of keep track of all the stuff we've asked them to do. And so this one wouldn't be one that I would expect a written report back and another agenda item, but at least that it would be out there on the list until it's complete, so that if, next week or, at the next committee meetings, council says, oh, and we'd also like administration to do this, we can start to see the cumulative effect, as Director Bork described, of these council directed actions. So, Councillor Bressey, I don't remember all the details of your motion. I believe you had sent them forward to the clerk. So I don't have all the specific wording that you had, but I'd be happy to adopt it because I know that it was well thought out and had been presented to council before. So do you have that, Councillor Bressey?
Yes, Mayor Gibbon, let me manage all the screens I've got for this and see if I.
So while you're finding that, Councillor Bressey, I'll just say that I'll for the recording secretary, I'd be happy to take the language provided by Councillor Bressey as my motion, and adding to the end and request that this item be reflected on the outstanding items list until the work is complete, period.
And the motion I brought to council, which I've sent to the recording secretary, and I'll forward it again right away if this does, and I'll forward it right away, but it was direct administrations create a page on the city website with information for residents about door-to-door sales, including buyers' rights under provincial legislation, identification requirements for sellers, and how complaints can be made to the province and city. And in spring 2021, advertise the information through city social media channels, and with Mayor Gibbons' addition.
Yeah, so I'm comfortable making that motion. And then again, the intent of showing this on the outside, just so that administration knows, this isn't to add it to the outstanding items list so it feels like it's a longer list or that it's, that there's more work there for administration. But I think it is important, as Director Bork reflected, to recognize the cumulative impact of a whole bunch of small requests so that we don't get in a regular practice of just saying, oh, well, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? And then eventually over time, council becoming frustrated because this administration is busy doing a bunch of stuff that we don't see reflected anywhere. If it's on the outstanding items list, we'll know that it's happening. It will give administration a chance to point our attention to that and to report back when something's been concluded.
Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Councillor Bressey. I'm in support of the motion. I think that asking for something by spring is prudent because that's likely when activity will start to increase again. And I'm hoping that that's long enough for it to be accomplished without putting undue pressure on the department to get it done. I really do believe that there is only limited information available to the general public, as you discovered in your own incident, and I think that anything that we as a city can do to help our residents deal with these kinds of situations is worthwhile. So I will vote in favor of that. Thank you.
Well, and I appreciate the indulgence on something that is a fairly detailed thing and is at a much lower level than typically I try to bring things to council. I just know that when somebody shows up at your door and you get defrauded, it feels a lot more personal. And for me, it was a matter of a couple of weeks where I had something in my house. I remember talking to one resident in particular who was a senior and had been locked into a 3-year contract of something that was in her household that she had to see every day. And she talked about how I just remember that person every day, even though it happened to her a year and a half ago. And so it is something that I appreciate council indulging me. I hope this doesn't impact too many residents, but I think it has a very big impact on the residents that it does. So I feel a lot better if we're doing what we can do to help them protect themselves. So I appreciate the indulgence on this. Is there any other discussion? In that case, I will call the question or call the motion to question. All in favor? And I see Councillor Thiessen with his hand up, so that passes unanimously. And again, Council, thank you for indulging me. I appreciate it. With that, we'll move on to item 3.1, Brochu Industrial Park Servicing, and that is Ms. Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair Bressey. The Bylaw and Policy Review Committee directed administration to review Bylaw C-1167 and the concept of extending utility services to Brochu Industrial Park. Off-site water and sanitary systems have not been extended to most of Brochu Industrial Park. Currently, developed parcels do have on-site systems such as tanks, wells, or septic fields. The storm drainage is conveyed by ditches until it reaches the southeast corner where it enters a pipe system. Servicing within Brochu Industrial Park reflects the standard required when it was developed. It is the city's policy to require developers and landowners to install or pay for installation of municipal services and improvements that benefit their land. I have included in your package a map showing conceptually how services for water, sanitary, and storm could be extended. It's Schedule B. Previously, local improvements were brought forward and did propose looking at water and sanitary. Storm was not included in the previous local improvements. Not all services need to be extended. There is a benefit, though, if there's construction occurring, that it all occur concurrently. So installation of services will involve excavating and reconstructing much of the road, which is why the high-level cost estimate's quite high. And it's one of those magnitude Bs where we really haven't done any design. The estimate that I've put into the report is $5.8 million. It should be noted, when I reached out to our assessment department, they indicated that assessments of typical improved parcels in Brochu Industrial Park have not required an adjustment for lack of servicing in the past. Sales and lease rates that have been reported are comparable to similar properties located within the Bridgman Industrial Park. So technically it is viable to extend services. Financial feasibility and merit for the property owners will vary. Improved parcels have already invested on-site systems, so they might not see the benefit as much, whereas vacant lots would benefit the most. In reviewing the bylaw, it was noted that currently, prior to any subdivision occurring in there, both water and sanitary need to be extended. It is proposed that the bylaw be amended, so that's attached as bylaw C-1167A, that would allow subdivision of parcels once water supply for fire protection has been provided. This could benefit larger properties that have low site coverage, that are perhaps further away from where the sanitary would start. So it's recommended committee provide recommendation to council to give first, second, and third reading to the proposed bylaw C-1167A.
Great. Thank you. Mayor Given.
Yeah, so I was on the Bylaw and Policy Review Committee when we asked how this come forward. I really appreciate administration's work on this. I think that this is, the proposal's a really good update in that it reaffirms the city's desire to ensure that there is consideration for safety, while maybe removing some of the barriers that might have prevented intensification of the area. And so it looks, Christine, if I'm understanding correctly, that the main change here is removing the requirement for sanitary to be a part of it. Like basically we're saying, okay, fine, there's other ways to handle sewage, and sanitary. The city will now, the current city council policy is that we will allow you to subdivide as long as you get water. And many of the properties are closer to water. Is that fair?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. So, I think that this is a good move. It provides additional opportunities for some of those larger parcels that there may be a economic case to subdivide and intensify. This is an example of the city removing some barriers that might prevent businesses from doing that, while still pointing an eye towards ensuring that there's safety and fire protection in the area. So I think this is a great update. I'd be happy to support and move it after there's some discussion.
Councillor Pilat, then Councillor Blackburn.
Thanks, Chair Bressey. I'm a little bit confused when I read the report, so I'm just hoping to get clarification on it. So how is this going to be getting the 5.8 million projected? How is it going to get paid for?
Ms. Donnelly.
Through the chair, I'm not suggesting that we move forward with extending servicing. We've attempted to do local improvements in this area before, and those attempts were defeated. If the businesses and property owners within Brochu are interested in a local improvement and investing into, the full thing, the 5.8 million, then there is a process for them to come forward and request that we do that. And there is information available from Legislative Services, and we can help them out. There's also something on our website that tells them how to access that information. So if there's a desire to do so, that's the whole thing. There might be some businesses just along one section of the road or where the water is that might have a desire. So I think there's flexibility for us to work with businesses that exist in there or lots that are undeveloped if they wish to come forward. I'm not suggesting that we move forward with doing anything based on the 5.8 million.
Okay, and just so on that, so if we were to move this through and it goes to the bylaw, and we approve the new bylaw changes, does that still allow somebody to just buy one of those vacant pieces of land and service it as they would have been able to before? Or I'm just a little bit confused on that.
Yeah, Ms. Donnelly.
Through the chair. So if someone wishes to buy a parcel and extend water and sanitary and drive that themselves, we can work with them as well as Aquaterra to do so. We would let them lead that request and coming up with the solutions and method to make it happen.
Okay, so I guess I'm struggling. Is this just a housekeeping amendment then? I'm struggling with what the purpose of this is then.
And Ms. Donnelly, if you could just let me, maybe if I could try. My understanding is right now, if somebody wants subdivided land, they need to pay to bring in both water and sewage under the existing bylaws is today. This would take away the requirement to bring in sewage. They'd only have to bring in water. So it's actually making it easier to subdivide. And that's because if you look at our map, sewage, there isn't as availability to connect sewage. You have to build a longer pipe on many properties to connect sewage than you do to water. Is that a correct understanding I've got, Ms. Donnelly?
Correct.
Councillor Pilat, do you still have more questions? Great. Thank you. Councillor Blackburn. Oh, and Councillor
Thank
Clayton.
you, Councillor Bressey. I'm a little confused about this as well, but I'm starting to get a better understanding of it. I guess my question has to do with local improvements and the fact that the requesting party ends up paying for that through the tax roll. What I don't know is whether or not, when an improvement like that is made, whether the responsibility spreads to neighbors as well, or whether the entire cost is borne by the party that requests the improvement.
Ms. Donnelly, do you know how that process works? Yeah, please. Ms. Donnelly, if you know, please.
Yeah, to the chair. So a local improvement is it's recovered from the people that benefit. So, for example, if sanitary, a local improvement has to be supported by all of the people that are impacted. There is a bylaw that has to be done. And when that's put forward, all of the people that would have to pay are notified of what they're getting into and the cost. And then they have an opportunity to petition against the local improvement and defeat that bylaw so that the paperwork does not get extended. And that's what's happened twice in Brochu. The city initiated a local improvement for water back in 2003 for fire protection, and then that local improvement was defeated. The city again initiated, or also actually, no, it might have been landowner. In 2006, there was another local improvement. Not sure who initiated it. It can be a landowner or it can be the city that initiates it. And that one was also defeated. And that's what led to the city passing this bylaw saying, hey, we've made this attempt. And to make sure people understood that the service wasn't there. So if the businesses in that area do wish to see the services extended, my suggestion would be that they initiate the local improvement or come forward and we have those conversations with Aquaterra and come up with solutions. But my suggestion is that it be driven by those property owners, and primarily because of the fact that assessment has said that the value of the land may not increase through that extension, and so they may not be interested in participating once again.
So if I understand the bylaw correctly, somebody cannot subdivide and build without the improvement happening. So does that mean that neighbors could prevent somebody from subdividing and improving a piece of property?
So I think what you might be asking, Councillor Blackburn, and correct me if it's wrong, but is there a way to develop and subdivide and bear the expenses yourself, you own property there, without your neighbors agreeing to participate in a local improvement? Is that what you're asking, Councillor Blackburn?
Yeah, in essence, I want to know whether or not neighbors have the ability to prevent a successful subdivision.
Ms. Donnelly, could you take a stab at that?
Yeah, if the extension of services is to occur through a local improvement, then yes. But if that landowner is going to pay for all of it themselves and we're not trying to recover through a local improvement, then no, they couldn't prevent that person from doing it. So primarily for us, the concern is the water for fire protection, and that's why that was connected to the subdivision.
Okay, if I may ask one more question. Typically, from my experience in the utility business, if an extension is required to a particular landowner, it involves building infrastructure that will pass in front of other potential later subdivisions. And so if the first landowner has paid the full cost of an improvement like that, and a second landowner whose property is adjacent to something that's just been built, do they end up being required to share in the cost of the original construction?
Ms. Donnelly.
So we have, in circumstances like that, entered into endeavors to recover, and we have the ability at both subdivision and development permit stage to put conditions for entering into servicing agreements with the goal of recovery on behalf of that person. And so those have been called endeavors.
Thank you.
Councillor Blackburn. Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Chair Bressey. Ms. Donnelly, I just want to confirm, also with a little bit of confusion here. So bylaw committee assessing bylaws that need to be revisited with impact over $1 million, had a discussion on this, then in turn it comes to committee. Now committee, the recommendation obviously is to send it to council for revisiting of this bylaw. But in regards to process of this, so bylaw committee will continually bring things forward to committee. They can die at committee level, correct?
So I'll take that one. Just the bylaw committee doesn't exist anymore. So council disbanded that, and now we've got a regular review process where every 4 years, every policy and bylaw is going to come to one of the standing committees, and this is going through that process. And by all means, when a bylaw or policy comes to committee doesn't have to send it to council. Committee's definitely got the freedom to say, sorry, we're just receiving this report for information. We're taking no action at this time, but that's what's going on. So that committee's disbanded. This will be happening through our regular standing committees from now on.
Okay, great, thank you. And so I don't know if Director Glavin's still on. I have a question for him, if appropriate. Thanks. Director Glavin, I'm curious to your knowledge in regards to economic development uptake. Has there been any interest in additional investment in this land that would require these upgrades?
In recent memory, no, there's been no push in that area to require increased servicing.
Great, thank you.
So I've got Mayor Given and then Councillor Pilat.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm going to make the motion contained in the report. I won't repeat it. It's, committee recommend council give 3 readings. And I'm just going to, I guess, point council's attention to what I think is sort of the essential issue here. What this proposes to do is make it easier for businesses to intensify or subdivide if they wanted to. There is no proposal here that the city requires them to do anything. There's no proposal here that the city increase costs on them. All this change to the existing bylaw does is remove one barrier. So it's actually council making it easier for businesses to do what they might want to do. And further to that, if you look at the diagram that's contained in the report of where services are currently extended, this will mostly be of use to the properties on the north and east sections of Brochu, where you can see the solid blue line is a water line that runs by. Basically what we're saying here is, if those larger properties want to subdivide into smaller properties, they can do so as long as they connect to that water line that's right beside them. We're not forcing any of the other properties to do anything. We're not trying to institute a local improvement levy. We're basically removing one barrier that's a leftover from the early 2000s and saying, hey, you know what? Don't worry about installing sanitary services because there isn't any in Brochu. Don't worry about that, but please do connect to the water line, and then we'd be happy to support subdivision. So just, the essential element here is that we're removing a barrier that would have prevented particularly those, probably those large parcels on the north end from subdividing. Doesn't mean that there's somebody knocking on the door today. It just means that the city of Grande Prairie has taken away one barrier that would have stood in the way of the market and businesses operating, in a way that might make sense.
Councillor Pilat.
Thanks, Chair Bressey. So I'm sorry, I'm still a little bit confused on this. So as of today, I buy a vacant lot in there. As long as I can get water and sewer to my site, I can develop it. Is that correct? So can put a building on it?
Maybe something that would be helpful is I've got the existing bylaw open in front of me, and we're talking about modifying a line that doesn't appear in the report. So maybe I'll read the existing bylaw and how the existing bylaw, as it stands right now, if council takes no action, is it says, council also wishes to reaffirm its policy that no subdivision of land in the Brochu Industrial Park be permitted unless the parcel to be subdivided is to receive city water and sewage services. So right now, as it stands today, you need water and sewage services. Ms. Donnelly, please correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is if this bylaw passes, we're taking off that and sewage services, and we're just saying to receive city water. And so today, right now, there's that restriction of you need to do both. This bylaw amendment would say you just have to do one of those, is my understanding of what we're talking about today. Ms. Donnelly.
So you're correct, and the bylaw is written for subdivision stage. If there's an existing lot and you don't wish to subdivide it, you could come in directly for a development permit, and you would go through the land use bylaw based on that process. The current bylaw that I'm recommending you amend is only related to subdivision, and those two lots at the north are substantial in size, and those were definitely the ones I was thinking of when putting this forward.
Okay, I think with Councillor Bressey explaining the current bylaw that was in our package, that makes a lot more sense. I was just confused. It made it seem to me like now they have to put in water, and before they didn't even have to do that, and we were actually making this more prescriptive and more expensive. But now that I understand what the bylaw was before, that makes more sense, so thank you.
Any other questions or debate? I think for me, I'll definitely support it. I really like that we're making it easier to subdivide land, and I do know that it is a little bit confusing, but I know there's at least one landowner in Brochu who very much understands the restrictions that they've got, because it took me about 20 minutes over a coffee to understand their concerns with this when they asked to share these concerns with me about a year and a half ago. And so I know that it's a weird process for us, but there's at least one landowner there that knows this, and I think we'll be excited to hear that we've made it easier for them to do whatever they want to do with their land. So I'll be supporting this. Any other conversation or debate? In that case, I will call it to question. All in favor? And Councillor Thiessen has his hand up, so that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Donnelly. We appreciate the report. And then I will move on to item 3.2, which is our parkland bylaw, and that is Mr. Gear.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, Councillors, good morning. I guess it's still morning, close. Before you, you have an administrative report, and it's in support of a new bylaw, C-1310, which would be the parkland bylaw. So administration recommends that committee recommend to council to give 3 readings to the bylaw C-1310, and being the parkland bylaw as presented. I know you probably have the administrative report before you. I don't know if you want me to go through each point by point. I can certainly do that if you want.
I think we're okay without point by point.
Yeah, okay. Yes. Moving forward, I'll certainly answer any questions that you have at the end. Just when we get to the page 4, risk, I believe with the updated bylaw, risk of litigation is lessened. The city is taking steps to anticipate risk and mitigate risk through this regulation. From the budgeting side, there is really no impact to the budget. There may be some additional fine revenue generated by this bylaw, but it certainly won't be significant. It will be a minor amount. So in summary, bylaw C-1310 is a new bylaw meant to be a replacement for the regulation of parks and recreation areas bylaw. It will bring parkland regulation up to date and address emerging issues relating to parkland. It expands the authority of the city council and the authority of the director, and provides updated fine amounts should a fine occur. Should an offense occur. So administration recommends council give 3 readings to the new bylaw C-1310, a bylaw to regulate the use of parklands. This new bylaw will update the regulations surrounding the use of city parkland. And subject to any questions you may have, that's the administrative report.
Great. Thank you for the report. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Councillor Bressey, and thank you for this report. It's comprehensive, and I think I understand it thoroughly. The question I have is regarding fines. The proposal is that the fines for occupying public land in all of the three categories that are listed is a $250 fine. And I can understand if we've got an organization or group or an individual who is acting in a way that violates this, that a fine might be appropriate. However, I think some of what happens in terms of occupying land has to do with homeless people setting up a place for themselves to live, even though it may only be temporary. And I'm not sure that a fine of $250 is the right thing to do to somebody who's already burdened with the issue of homelessness. And I'm wondering if there are ways around fining those kinds of people.
Through the chair, thank you for that question, Councillor. The fines, I think, are important because they give us a tool to deal with the difficult people. Not all homeless people are difficult people, and not all homeless people or street engaged people that set up tents will get a fine. Basically, we move to enforcement action after we've done education with them, after we've clearly identified what will happen if they don't, if they don't follow the law. However, if it comes to that, which is seldom, then it does give us an appropriate tool to deal with that. With all of our bylaws, I think the city is very clear that the first step is always education, always try to get cooperation or collaboration with the person, and failing that, then we have the fines to fall back on.
Thank you. I appreciate that assurance.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. I'm not seeing any other hands up, but I've got a couple of questions myself I'd like to ask. Oh, sorry. Councillor Thiessen, Councillor Freeze, and then I'll get myself in. So, Councillor Thiessen.
Appreciate that, Chair Bressey. Thanks very much for the report, Mr. Gear. In sort of relation to what Councillor Blackburn had brought up, just going over some of the general prohibition. Some of them are just sort of standard fare with childhood. So one of them, I'm looking at general prohibition point 20, except with a permit or written permission from the director of parklands, no person shall. And so I'm looking specifically at B, which is distribute any handbills or circulars, and also D, throw or cast any stones, balls of snow or ice, projectiles, or any other dangerous object, unless it is part of a recreational sport specifically permitted in parkland. So are we essentially saying by passing this bylaw that children are no longer allowed to throw snowballs?
Mr. Gear.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question through the chair. No, not at all. Again, what these general prohibitions are for the worst case scenario, right? I mean, if you have somebody that throws an ice ball and injures somebody, we need to prohibit that. It doesn't apply to children having a snowball fight. Our officers will use good discretion and common sense. And again, it doesn't mean we have to act. We can always have that conversation and talk to the person, but it does give us the tools in case there is some sort of person throwing something that is dangerous, some sort of projectile that could injure another person.
And then the other one that I got is a lot of times I'll go down to Muskogee Park in the summertime, and people are trying to advertise for community events. They typically undertake this themselves. It could be anything from protest to, a mini concert or some awareness that they want to hand out. I also think of the deaf and mute people that hand out their little cards. Now, with B, this would require them now to get a permit.
Through the chair, yes, Councillor, it would. Again, the intention of this is sometimes we have groups, on public land, on parkland, that really hand out a lot of circulars, and basically it becomes a litter problem. It becomes a bit of a nuisance problem. Again, if there was a person or a group out there very, just handing out some very small circulars and talking to people, I don't think we'd be involved. This is meant for a bigger event where the circulation of handbills becomes an issue, becomes a problem. If it does become a problem, again, we have that discretion. We can just have a conversation with the person. But if it does become a problem, then we can say, no, sorry, before you go ahead with this, you need to seek a permit.
Okay. All right. I'll let other people ask questions here, but I still got, it's still a bit so on both of those. But anyways, I know Councillor Thiessen and Councillor Bressey are in the queue. So,
Councillor Thiessen, I know I said you're next, but could I ask a question? Do you mind if I ask a question about this in particular? Just that prohibition on circulars and throwing objects, Mr. Gear, are those new prohibitions, or does the language there match the existing bylaw that we've already got today?
I would actually have to look at the old bylaw. Many of these, the vast majority, came from the existing bylaw. If they were part of the existing bylaw, I didn't see any reason to change them as long as they made, as long as they did some sort of sense. Sorry, I would have to go back and compare it to the old bylaw.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you. So I noticed that there's a differential in $100 to $250. Some of them seem to be a higher penalty for activities that may create damage to the park, and or are, generally speaking, more offensive. My question is, though, is there also potentially recourse for the city to charge monetarily, not criminally or any other way, but charge residents or individuals who create damage for restoration of the parkland that they've damaged?
Through the chair, thank you. I believe there is. I'm just going up to the bylaw. I don't, actually reading it, I don't know if there is a specific section set out just for the city to recoup damages. Not in this bylaw. I don't believe. I think that would be use of public lands bylaw would be appropriate for that.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Is there anybody else hoping to get in? I'll get it. Councillor Thiessen wants to get in again, but he's already had a kick if he can, so I'll take a kick first. A question I've got is, when it comes to alcohol and cannabis, I'm noticing that there's no rules about them in this bylaw, or if there are, I'm missing them, but I'm not aware of what other bylaws it might be regulated by. So if this passes, what would be the rules around consumption of alcohol and cannabis in parks?
Through the chair, that would be covered under another bylaw. We have a bylaw that specifically speaks to the use of cannabis in public places, so it would be covered through that. The use of alcohol is covered through provincial law. You cannot consume alcohol in a public place under the Gaming and Liquor and Cannabis Act. So it's also covered under the provincial law as well. So there is other laws that clearly cover that. So I think that's covered off fairly well.
So, and I guess where I'm confused by that is the provincial government has one of the first things, actually the first thing they communicated to municipalities was changes to the rules around alcohol in parks. And I guess I'm not current on what changes they actually made. So with the changes that have been made recently, is that alcohol is allowed in parks unless municipalities prohibit it? Or is it that we've got the freedom to allow alcohol in certain circumstances, but if we haven't explicitly allowed it, then it's prohibited?
Through the chair, yes, the latter is under my understanding, the latter is the proper explanation. Right now, unless the city, explicitly allows it, then it is prohibited under provincial law.
Great, thank you. And then just one other one other, not so much a question for Mr. Gear, but just a thought for committee that we might consider as an amendment in item 20 under K. There's prohibitions about digging in soil, removing any trees or plants, basically damaging vegetation, which is very appropriate. Except for we've also been doing a lot more edible planting in our community, and I really do trust bylaw that they're not going to be going around and giving somebody a ticket for picking some Saskatoon berries, and I trust them to be reasonable, but I wonder if it might be worth making it explicit to the public in this bylaw that, hey, if you see an edible plant, please pick that. Please, we want you to pick that. We want you to eat that. I wonder if that might be worth mentioning in the bylaw. Mr. Gear, I'm just curious. Am I missing somewhere in the bylaw where it talks about edibles, or is that not mentioned in the bylaw?
Through the chair, no, we don't we didn't add anything about that. I didn't add anything about that. Again, you're very right in your assessment of K. It was never meant to stop people from picking berries or eating, Saskatoons or anything like that. It's just when, it was meant to keep people from going into a parkland and digging up a plant and taking it away or something to that effect. We certainly would apply some good common sense and discretion with this subsection.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, and that might be something that we might consider amending in terms of I really do trust enforcement. I have had people ask me multiple times, though, if I see edible plants in the community, am I allowed to eat those? And they honestly don't know, and they might go to this bylaw to try to figure out do they know or not. So not so much because I don't trust enforcement to have common sense, but just for those really well-intentioned residents who are looking at this bylaw, it might be worth making it very clear to them that they're allowed. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Chair Bressey, and thanks again, Mr. Gear. Dylan, you took off one of the things I wanted to ask about, which is edibles. Thanks for doing that. I appreciate that acknowledgement of what is in our community. Mr. Gear, there's a couple more questions that I have just in regards, and of course this could be old stuff, but if we're renewing this, something that we should keep in mind. In regards to activities allowed in designated areas, number 15, I have highlighted the A and the B on ride downhill on a toboggan, sleigh, carpet, or other sledding device, and B, ride downhill on skis on a snowboard or another similar device. I'm more partial to A in this regard, since we do have a ski hill and we do have some designated areas, but is this going to require us to set up signs wherever there's a hill in neighborhoods where kids might want to go tobogganing because it's in their neighborhood?
Through the chair, no, it shouldn't impact our toboggan hills or any hill like that. Basically, what this allows is, it gives the director or the parks manager some discretion to manage these areas. If something should happen and they need to manage it, then they certainly can. But no, we certainly recognize the importance of outdoor activities. We're a northern community that that loves the outdoor activities, sledding, skiing, playing hockey, even playing disc golf. We encourage these things, and basically they would be certainly permitted unless there was some sort of signage or some sort of message saying that it was strictly prohibited.
Okay, no, that's good. Yeah, because I guess you can see where I was going with this. I don't want fun, affordable, like childhood activities to start becoming a cause of concern in our community. So I'm going to get off that train, but there's one more that is a little bit lower on the list. And I agree with most of it, but under 34, when we're talking about without a permit from the director, no person shall operate a drone in any parkland unless. Now, drones are becoming more and more popular, and in fact, you can fly a drone and operate a drone from your front yard if you live across the street from a park. You can definitely set it off in your front lawn and then fly it over the park. How do we go about enforcing that?
Well, through the chair, this regulation was brought in. When I did research on this bylaw, I went out to the major other municipalities in Alberta, and a lot of them had a similar sort of regulation in their bylaws. And the reason that it was considered is because we are so close to quite a busy municipal airport. Increasingly, our airport is becoming very important. And so what we did, the regulation is very much in line with Canadian aviation regulations. Basically, I took most of it right out of their playbook. You know, for most drones, if it's a drone under 250 grams, you can certainly fly it. They're it's meant to regulate the bigger drones, the ones that could possibly cause an injury to an airplane if they were coming in. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, sort of. Like, and it does say that in the points A and B. I was just looking at the point C, and yeah, in regards to, well, I suppose that a drone can be operated in a designated area, but we don't necessarily designate those areas, and it's sort of similar to like the tobogganing hill. So I don't know if that means our bylaw enforcement or our GIS team needs to start setting up maps and locations for where you can fly a drone. According to aviation, I know they can't fly so high. I know that part of it, and I think that's reflected in the bylaw. I think maybe it's just the designated areas that is just troubling me, just in the language, and only because if I was somebody who had a bit of power and that empowered me to say I know the law and I can enforce it, that it could bring some challenging situations to our enforcement services as well as to our administration or council.
Through the chair, Councillor Thiessen. Yeah, it reads no person shall operate a drone, and unless, and then it's I see what you mean. It's in a designated area approved by the director. Yeah.
So
I get what you mean. Yeah.
Do we have any designated areas for drone flying that you're aware of?
No. I think no. I'm not aware of any designated area. I was just putting some tools in, but yes, that perhaps that should be. Unless the drone is operated outside of a designated area approved by the director. The idea was to give the director or the parks manager the ability to say in this area or a certain area we shouldn't be flying drones because there's a safety concern. That was the intent of that subsection, is just to give that authority to the director, just to say, yeah, you know, let's exclude this area because it's dangerous.
Yeah, so do we know which areas are dangerous to fly drones in the community?
No, but you know, like you pointed out, it is an emerging thing. We see more and more of these drones. Where I would have a concern is if they get too close to the airport. That's the biggest concern. Is we want people to enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. I've purchased drones for my grandkids, but at the same time, you know, we don't want them near the airport. We don't want them to interfere with the plane and cause any issue there.
Awesome. Thank you. No, I don't want to give you any extra work. You've done a little bit of work here, but yeah, it's language is really important with policies and bylaws, I think, sometimes, because it can intimate either we got to create maps or designated areas or whatnot. I know the airport, sitting on the commission, that we have policies around drone flying and how close they're allowed to fly to the airport. So in regards to enforcement, perhaps a telephone conversation with Brian Grant from the airport may be helpful in understanding if we were going to set out designated non-fly zones in the city of Grande Prairie, that we do that in conjunction with the airport and their knowledge of aviation. Thanks.
I think my concern with drones. Sorry, Mayor Given. Are you about drones, or are you asking about something else, Mayor Given? Then please, Mayor Given.
Yeah, just on the drone issue, I think I heard Mr. Gear say that he really referenced or copy and pasted, the federal regulations, which are pretty well defined. There is a map, there is all that sort of stuff, to my knowledge. And at least my interpretation would be that, this basically gives a municipal bylaw officer the right to enforce those federal regulations under a municipal bylaw, right? Like I don't think our bylaw officers have the ability to enforce federal Transport Canada regulations if we didn't have anything in our bylaw. So basically what it sounds like we've done is we've taken those federal regulations, written them into our bylaw, and then if necessary, if necessary, up to the judgment of the officer in an egregious situation, our bylaw officers would now have authority to enforce those things that look very much like the federal regulations. That's my guess. Did I butcher that at all, Mr. Gear?
No, through the chair, Mr. Mayor, that's exactly the intent. Is just at this point, it's not really an issue. However, looking forward, it certainly may become an issue, and we just wanted to put some tools in there if it ever did become an issue.
Just on the topic of drones, I'm really comfortable with where this is for just the person out there having fun with drones. I wonder if it might be worth doing an amendment to the weight limit and allowing the director to waive that weight limit for specific people. And mostly, and where my thinking for that is for somebody who's doing something professional for marketing. There's a use for drones. I'm thinking for the Bear Creek Folk Festival, they've got in some wonderful photos that are with drones. I know that the Disc Golf Club, we just did a fly-through of the disc golf course with drones so we can showcase our course of the regions. And at least the drone that I was using this summer was more than 250 grams. And I think it's reasonable to say, hey, you can't just generally go flying this over a crowd in Musk CB Park when you feel like it. But if there's a professional who has the appropriate licenses, has the appropriate training, and has a real use for that, I sure think that it's appropriate for them to be able to get permission to do it. Maybe not have the right to do it, but be able to get permission to go out and do it. Director Glavin.
Thank you, Chair Bressey. So as what we are speaking to here is a federal jurisdiction, and there are some fairly clear guidelines of what you can and can't do, what requirements you need to have. Specifically, registering your drone, getting basic or your advanced drone pilot certificates are done through the federal government. The weight limits for drones being between 250 grams and 25 kilograms. There's some basic operations that you're allowed to perform with your drone and where you can do it. You currently have to be able to see it all the time. You have to fly below 400 feet or 122 meters. You have to be 1.9 kilometers away from a heliport, 5.6 kilometers away from an airport or outside controlled airspace, as well as a number of other basic requirements for piloting your drone. So I wonder if perhaps we can circulate some information to council with some of the basic things that you're required to do under Transport Canada federally in order to operate your drone that are outside of our jurisdiction in that respect.
I think that might be useful. That might be useful, and that might get us through today quicker if there'd be a promise of circulating that to council. So I think that would be appreciated if you could. Any other questions or debate about this bylaw? Is anybody willing to make a motion? Councillor Blackburn?
I'll make the recommended motion.
Great. Thank you. Is there, so we do have a motion to forward this to, I'm just going through my agenda package. So the recommended motion was to recommend to council to give 3 readings to this bylaw. So is there any discussion or debate on sending this to council? Great, then I will call to question. All in favor? And that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Aguirre. Appreciate the thought that you put into this and appreciate you walking us through it. And with that, we will move on to the outstanding items list, and that is Director Glavin.
Thank you, Chair Bressey. Today we had item 1104, which was the bylaw for Brochet Water and Sanitary. as well. We heard from Ross Gear on the parkland bylaw. We will be bringing forward an additional review on bylaw C-1078, which is the use of public lands, to the next committee meeting. And as I discussed at the last committee meeting, that we were contemplating delaying the stormwater utility model until the January 5th meeting. We did choose to do that, and I can't remember how much detail I gave you last time, but essentially one of the interesting things that we found out internally is we have access to some data that is through GIS with our orthographic photo that we do, which is, I think they call it the fourth band, which I'll let them expand on the technical nature of that. But essentially, we have the ability to utilize machine learning and AI in order to make our jobs a lot easier. What we thought would potentially take months of analysis to do can be done in a few days, utilizing some of the technology we have in-house. And so by giving them a little bit more time to perfect it, we could have a much more accurate product at the end of the day. So we've chosen to give them a few more weeks in order to do that, but we still anticipate having a report back the 1st of January. And with that, that's my update.
Thank you, Director Glavin. Any questions? Councillor Thiessen.
No, thank you, Chair Bressey. I'd just be prepared to move the outstanding items list as amended.
Great. Well, I'll definitely accept that motion. So any conversation or debate on that motion? In that case, all in favor? And that motion passes unanimously. And with that, I will call our meeting adjourned. Thank you, folks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Clyde. Thanks, Bill.